Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you all for coming to this event. My name is Csaba Tóth. I'm Director of Strategy of Republican Institute and also member of the board of the European Liberal Forum. And on behalf of the European Liberal Forum, also on behalf of Republican Institute, and if I may say in advance, also on behalf of Sir Hans van Mierlo Stichting from the Netherlands, let me welcome you all to this event, Common Ground for Liberal Migration Policies, which is an ELF, so-called Rolf Dahrendorf roundtable. Thank you all for coming, and thank you, our guests, for being here. My role here is to open this event in a few words, and then get to the content of this discussion. For those of you who are not familiar, this is my happy role to say to you as member of the board of the European Liberal Forum. The European Liberal Forum is the official party foundation of the ALDE party, which is of course the Liberal Party in the European Parliament. As you might know, all European parliamentary groups and parties have their own foundations. The ELF is special, that it has members which are not necessarily affiliated with certain parties, like Republican Foundation, which is a liberal think tank, but not affiliated to any one party. Our partner here, Sir Hans van Mierlo Stichting, is also a member of the European Liberal Forum, or also, although they are, of course, affiliated with one specific political party. If you're interested in the activities of the European Liberal Forum, do check out our website, liberalforum.eu. And for those of you, especially I would imagine non-Hungarians who use Twitter to communicate on social media, please use the hashtag ELFevent at this event. And please also sign all the papers we provide you with so that we can give feedback. That was the administrative task, and now on to content. Migration policy, immigration, asylum, refugees, many different words. Those in Hungary know that especially in certain circles in Hungary, this is called the migráció, migráns in Hungarian. Of course, in the international context, it has many different elements. We discuss this very often, but discuss it maybe from our own Hungarian viewpoint. And it is our very great pleasure to be able to provide maybe somewhat different viewpoint here, maybe some different discussion. That is why we invited you here. The way our today will work will be as follows. First of all, the main event, so to speak, is a presentation for the liberal migration policy, or one possible interpretation of a liberal migration policy from Martha Hesselmans, who's I'm very happy to welcome here, who comes from Hans van Mierlo Stichting. This is a foundation, and Martha will correct me if I'm saying this wrong. This is a foundation affiliated with the D66 party. The D66 is a social liberal party in the Netherlands. There are two liberal parties in the Netherlands. This is one of them, the social liberal one, and has some vision for the migration policy here that we will discuss. After sort of this opening speech, after this opening on these policies, which, by the way, for those of you who are interested, you can find on that table. So at any point, or maybe in the lunch break, you can have that paper and you can have a look at that to see what liberals actually think, at least in the Netherlands, on migration, rather than just listening to what others say liberals think about migration, which is, of course, something that happens very often. After this, we will have a roundtable discussion with politicians. First of all, very happy to welcome Joris Becker, who's member of the Dutch Senate from D66, and he will explain a bit the situation in the Netherlands. And we will have three members from three different Hungarian political parties, whom I welcome at this point very much and thank very much for accepting this invitation on this very controversial topic. And I will, of course, explain them. I will be moderating this, but we will have in sitting order Péter, Ungár Gergely, Arato, and Miklós Hajnal from the LMP, the Democratic Coalition, and the Momentum Party. Then we will have a very short lunch break, and then we will have an expert discussion. But that expert discussion will be presented by my colleague, Daniel Miket, so I will not really talk in more length about that. So without further ado, and again, thanking you all for coming, I will now give the floor to Martha to present her and the Foundation's approach and vision on migration. And again, thank you for coming here, Martha.
Thank you. Yes, this works. That's great. I'm going to move this a little bit back. Hopefully not trip. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Chaba. And thank you so much for having me here. It is a true privilege to be here and talk about the topic of migration. Such a controversial topic here in Hungary, but also very much in the Netherlands and very much everywhere in Europe at the moment. Who am I? Chaba already introduced me, thank you. I work with the foundation of the Van Mierlo. The Van Mierlo Foundation in the Netherlands is indeed a social liberal think tank connected to the political party of D66. Social liberal, we also call it progressive liberal. And today I would like to talk with you about what it really means to have a progressive liberal vision on migration in Europe. I'm spelling this out like this because that's exactly how I would like to do my 15 minutes, to take you to step by step what we think are really key features of what a progressive liberal vision should look like. I'm going to do this by actually starting at the very end. Europe. What do we think is really important here about Europe? What is really at the key here? Now, I'm going to try to say something in Hungarian, and you are allowed to laugh at my pronunciation. Ekjek a sokfélességben. Good, you're laughing. But I think you get it, right? Unity in diversity. It's the motto of the European Union. No surprise there. I say this with a little bit of irony, because I think the diversity part we all get. Europe is tremendously diverse. We do not need to talk about that. It's the unity part. That's where it gets hard. If we look at Europe today, we mostly see division. We've seen crisis, euro crisis, the financial crisis, the so-called refugee crisis. It doesn't seem very harmonious at all. Yet, how do we look at this? When I think about this unity and diversity, I have to think about our Belgian friends. My Belgian friends always talk about how in Belgium they have 11 different governments. Did you know that? 11 different governments. It means they have Flemish governments and Wallonian governments, and then they have Brussels governments and federal government. And all these governments are constantly fighting. They're constantly arguing about how to organize everything in Belgium. It's very tedious. But as my Belgian friends always say, well, you know, we used to fight with weapons, with guns. There was bloodshed. Now we fight with bureaucrats, with paperwork, with endless meetings. And in a way, that's sometimes how I like to see Europe too. It's tedious and it's difficult, it's hard. We are fighting, but at least we are fighting in peace. So far, so good. Let's keep it that way. Now, let's keep talking, also especially about when it comes to the topic of migration. Migration, I would say, is very much made in Europe. We talk about migration now as if there is like a mass migration, like a crisis of people coming from outside of Europe to Europe. But we sometimes forget that at the same time, migration is very much a European phenomenon too. What I'm showing you here is just one of many graphs of how in our European countries, we have immigrants coming from other European countries. And especially interesting here is Luxembourg, all the way to the left. And you see that 1 out of 3 Luxembourgians is coming from another European country. This is not by accident. This has been a conscious policy by the Luxembourgian government to attract people from, especially Portugal. It was in the 70s, but still to help with the Luxembourgian economy. This is also happening in other countries, but other countries are also part of the emigration. Spain in the 70s and 80s actually was a country where lots of people left to other European countries. 2 million Spanish people left from Spain to migrate to other European countries. Hungary, since 1989, 350,000 people have left to emigrate to other European countries. So I'm not saying that migration is not a difficult issue. I'm just saying it is not one temporary crisis. It's a permanent reality that we are living with. And yes, it is a difficult reality. What is difficult about it is actually not only the immigration, but the integration. I think whenever we talk about migration, we need to talk about the integration of newcomers in our society. That, of course, is a very controversial issue at the moment, especially in not necessarily talking about integration of other people coming from other European countries, but from outside of Europe, from the so-called non-Western world, or to put it very bluntly, from Muslim countries. This is a very heated debate here in Hungary, definitely also in the Netherlands. And also here, a tiny story. My husband is Irish American. Why would I talk about an Irish American here? Well, the interesting thing is that when his family came to the United States in the 19th century, they were considered a threat. The Irish were, to say, the Muslims of the United States at that time. They were considered dangerous, people coming with a different religion, people coming with different political loyalties to the Pope and not to the American president. If you look at them now, Irish American, would anybody distinguish them? They're fully integrated in American society. That was unthinkable 150 years ago. Now, again, I'm not saying that we're not having issues. If we look at the Netherlands, integration of newcomers from all sorts of different countries definitely has been an issue. We have had real difficulties. But why? We've had difficulties, for example, with newcomers coming from countries like Morocco and Turkey to integrate in our society. Why has that been difficult? Partly because of our government policies. It's not the only reason, but it's an important reason. For a long time, the Netherlands thought, oh, these people are not going to stay, they're going to leave, we're not going to invest in them or their children. People ended up in the margins of society, ended up in a vicious circle, where they were in the margins of society, unemployed, lower educated, and other Dutch people looked at them as, oh, they're not really part of our society, so we push them further away in the corner. It was a vicious circle in which we ended up, but a vicious circle that is very slowly being broken. Slowly, I'm saying. We are still having difficulties. But what is rarely mentioned is the progress that is also being made here. That's why I'm showing you this graph. This is about migrant children that are slowly moving on to higher levels of education in the Netherlands. If you can see, the top line, it's a red line, those are children with Dutch backgrounds. Pretty high up, moving towards higher education levels. And then, I hope you can see it, but my arm is not long enough and I'm too small. But their purple line, that's an interesting line. That's a line of children with Moroccan migrant background. And you can see the discrepancy. For a long time, children with migrant Moroccan background have been in lower education levels. But it's getting better. And we see this also in other sectors of society. I think it's important that integration is something that we realize it takes time and it takes investment, both from the newcomers and from society. Now, to do that requires vision. I think if anything has been going wrong in the last couple of years, decades, in all these Euro crises, if you want to call it that way, is that we have not dared to have a long-term vision. We have not dared to really look further towards the future. What is needed to really guide migration in a good way, to regulate it, and to invest both in our own countries and in newcomers to make this work. Vision for me and for us as progressive liberals means that we are thinking about this future. We are thinking about the next generation. We are thinking about what kind of society we want our children to live in. A society in which we say migration is a reality whether you like it or not. Now, do we want to pass on a society where people are scared of migration? A society, a population that is aging, that is emigrating itself, that is in constant battle with newcomers? Or do we want to pass on a society that is confident, that is self-confident, and that says, okay, we have migration, and we're going to deal with it in a proper way. We are going to regulate this, and we're going to regulate this together, because migration in the end is in its essence a transnational phenomenon, a transnational development. As countries, we can hardly do this by ourselves. We have to cooperate. Now, I'm showing you this graph because I find it interesting when you look at Hungary. We see Hungary's at the top of countries where firms are having difficulties filling jobs. I'm sure there will be questions about this later because you know more about the details of this country than I do. But I found this an interesting graph because at the same time we see a population change, and we see this in other countries too. I'm not saying that migrants should always fill the gap, but I do say what I am saying is that we need to think about migration in a different way, in a way that we can say, how can we make the best of this for our own societies and for newcomers? Now, how can we do that in a progressive and liberal way? Then we need to talk about what is progressive liberal. A self-confident society is also self-confident about what it stands for, what values are to its core. For us, that means we are indeed not only liberal, but also progressive. And sometimes we call it social liberal. It's about the same thing. The thing is here that we say we not only stand for all individuals to be free from persecution. We don't only want all individuals to be free from persecution for their religion, or for their ethnicity, or for another background. We stand for that, and we stand for the freedom of individuals to develop. It's a so-called positive freedom, where we say an individual cannot be truly free without possibilities to build up his or her own life. And for that, you need affordable education, you need affordable housing, you need a society, a government that has a vision to work on development of our individuals. That is something we say, and that's why I'm having the world map here. We say as individuals we are interconnected, as countries we are interconnected. What happens here in Hungary has an impact on what's happening in South Africa. Climate change is an important one. The planes that we are using to fly, the cars, our industries are affecting climate change, and that affects sometimes other countries more than we even realize. I was in South Africa a few weeks ago, and they're experiencing the next drought after they've had two before. It's part of climate change. It's part of what we are influencing. It also goes in other ways, especially when we talk about migration. Migration, what are the roots of migration? Why are people coming to our European countries in the first place? Let's think about that. It has everything to do with the lack of freedom, the lack of development in other countries, and the freedoms and development that we have here. Even though there are huge differences between our European countries, for many Africans and Asians, Europe is the promised land. And people will come here as long as there are no real opportunities in their own countries to develop that freedom. So we say as progressive liberals, we want to invest in that. We want to make sure that people have these opportunities to fully develop wherever they are in the world, for their own benefit and for ours. Now, what does that mean concretely? We've written a book about this, and I'm not going to go into every single detail. You are very welcome to get the pamphlet that is over there that has the highlights of the proposals that we're making for a European asylum policy. But I will just like to talk about some of the most important parts of this. Because what we say, if we really want to work towards implementing a progressive liberal vision on migration, we need two things. We need a common European asylum policy with regular migration routes. Why am I mentioning these two together? One of the things that we are seeing now is that people who want to come to Europe, there are very few options for those people. To get a visa for work or for study is very difficult. It's only for the 0.1% of Senegalese elite that might be able to have a chance to do that. The other 99.9% who would like to come here cannot. And people will still do. They still want to come here because it's the promised land. So what they do, they take that bus across the Sahara, they take that boat across the Mediterranean, die, and then come here at our borders. And we are all upset because, well, you're not supposed to be here. This was not the way it's supposed to be. This is not regulated. This is illegal. And we send them back, and then they don't go back, and they end up undocumented in our countries, at the train stations. We've seen it all. That's not what we want. We want to regulate this. If people want to come to Europe, they have to be able to apply for attainable visa. And then we should be able to say yes or no, and for how long, and where. And it's something we have to do together. And why do we have to do this together? Well, welcome in the Schengen zone. We are in the Schengen zone. We have open internal borders. I think this is often forgotten in this debate. How much worth is that to us? How much worth is it to me to be able to travel here to Hungary and I hardly have to show my passport? The freedom, the free movement of goods and people is something that we have fought hard for in Europe. But if we want to keep that, we need to have common rules about asylum applications and about migration, because migrants are able to travel between our countries. So we need to organize this together. We can't just say, well, I think this is actually the real question. Can we say we are just going to do this by ourselves? Well, then we also are saying then you can't be part of Schengen. Is that really the choice? This is something I would love to talk about with all of you later. For us, we are making the choice. We want to do this together. That is the choice we're making as progressive liberals. These are some of the key features that we're highlighting. An egalitarian distribution of asylum applications. This is the taboo word. These are the asylum quota. That's a difficult one. But let's not make it that difficult. What is it really about? It's about that it's egalitarian. It means that we as European countries all take part in a system of processing asylum applications. Because we say, okay, we can, of course, have regional centers for asylum seekers in, for example, Tunisia, but people will still try to come. And then we need to be prepared for that. And we need to do that together in solidarity and not say, okay, Italy takes the brunt or people all go to Greece. No, we need to do that together, but then in consideration of population, in consideration of national GDP. And it should also be clear that we control the borders together. I am not in favor of open borders and let everybody just come in. No, I want this to be controlled. I want this to be regulated. But again, we need to do that together. We can't just leave it up to Spain to just control its own exterior border. We need to be in solidarity here as European. If we, again, want to have this Schengen zone, these open internal borders, then it is our common responsibility. But most of all, we need to invest in long-term ways to prevent this uncontrolled migration streams that we've had in the last couple of years. And that means that we need to have more attainable work and study visa to the EU, but also that we invest in our communities here and there. That we invest in communities in Africa, in Asia, and the Middle East, in good governance, in education, in employment, in fair trade. And also, and I think that is the last point that I really would like to make here, in our own communities. In our discussions about integration in the Netherlands, one thing that really comes up again and again is that it's not only the newcomers who need to be invested in so that they can actually contribute to our societies, but also other local communities. If we set up language courses for immigrants because we want them to learn Dutch, we should also set up language courses for the functionally illiterate, of which we have 2.5 million in the Netherlands. We as progressive liberals should invest in our countries, in our residents, whether they are new or not. And with that, I'm going to leave it for further debate. I thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Martha. And I now ask our panelists to come to the table. Yes, thank you. And dear audience, you will have the opportunity to ask questions about what was said, either in our Q&A sessions, and Martha will be participating in the second panel, so you can also ask questions there. Thank you. And thank you all dear panelists, for coming. This is in Hungary, so I wouldn't normally have to say this, but I do say it for our politician guests that, of course, being on this panel in no way means an endorsement of any of these policies. But of course, you will, of course, talk about that just in case any of our present press members would misunderstand anything that was in any way said. Thank you so much for being here. Let me introduce our panelists briefly. Again, in sitting order, Péter Ungár, Member of Parliament from Politics Can Be Different. Joris Becker, Member of the Dutch Senate, D66. Gergely Arato from the Democratic Coalition, Member of Parliament, and Miklós Hajnal, who fills the shoes or takes the place of Katalin Cseh from Momentum, who was originally accepted to come to the panel, but had other urgent business. Miklós, thank you for being here, and I apologize for this very non-gender friendly panel, but as you see, this is actually the result of late cancellations and not our efforts, and I do apologize for that. But in a way, it's really good because we all have to now reflect on what was said by Martha. The way we will do this is, first of all, for the sake of the senator and for the sake of the European Liberal Forum, I will speak English. You're welcome to speak Hungarian if you want, but also English, and of course the audience as well. I will first ask the senator to maybe add comments on it or describe the position of D66 on migration in the Netherlands. Describe for us what the situation is like in the Netherlands. Are there no-go zones? Is it really that horrible in the Netherlands that nobody actually dares go on the street? If I may make an ironic comment, and then I will ask our Hungarian guests to comment both on what was said and of course on the on the paper, because I'm sure they all have a lot to say, and then I will ask questions. Senator, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. My Hungarian indeed is very poor, so I will speak English, which is not my native language either. But we are a small country, so we are conscious that we need to speak other languages. And when I enter this cafe, I meet people who speak English as well. So I think in Hungary that conscious mind is here as well. I am a senator in the Dutch Senate, which is a two-tier system. So we have a legislative body which has full power to legislate, not to amend, but to approve or to reject propositions of law. And the vision explained by Martha is mine, but of course I have to work with the realities. And one of the realities is that the Netherlands is a country of minorities. And if there is one common feature that is crucial in our policies ever since we are a democracy, we have the 100 years of suffrage universel, we celebrate this year in May, is that of pacification, we call it. The pacification, the peaceful settlement of controversies between the minorities in our country. And when I speak about minorities, it's not maybe ethnic as well, but in particular religious. And so we were successful in a pacification of the Catholic majority, the Protestant majority, the Jewish majority, and all variations in the Protestant church, at least 4 or 5 different versions of the right Protestant belief. And so we have been developing the art of building coalitions. And the practice of today is that my party is one of a 4-party coalition. And here I come to migration. In that 4-party coalition, we have a coalition agreement. And on this coalition agreement, this was a long negotiation, because we are here with the conservative liberals, with the Christian Democrats, and with the Protestants, you could say social oriented Protestants, but very strong on ethical issues. But they and ourselves, we are very strong as well on the humanitarian aspect of migration and on the issues that Martha explained. So as it goes in the tradition of pacification. We agreed on a managed migration policy and on, which is something that we really have had to fight for, an integration policy as of day one. So not letting people hang around, but start schooling, start work as soon as possible. Now, is this easy? No, this is not easy. We have certain areas in the big cities where we have more than 200 nationalities. Now, is that easy? 200 different nationalities. Could be 2 or 3 Greeks and 5 Bulgarians, but if you add it all up, minorities. It is manageable. But we have our issues. We had 2 weeks ago, we have a shooting in Utrecht. You may have heard about it, which immediately is framed as an Islamic attack. But in fact, I don't know all the details, but it's more of a weirdo with psychological problems who uses the frame of Islamic attack. So it's very, sometimes you have to be careful in explaining what's going to happen. Is it easy? No, it is not, but we manage. And I hope we will be able, with this government, and if not the next, to establish policies, as Martha agreed, on managed migration instead of trying to... And of course, European policies will come to that later.
Thank you so much for this introduction, Senator. Now I will ask our Hungarian guests to provide their insights and their position on this issue, and also maybe on the opening paper and the opening statements, so that they can say with their own words what they themselves or their party represents on this very, very, very controversial and very difficult issue in Hungary. We haven't really discussed the speaking order, so whoever would like to start. Gergely.
Konferencián rádöbbentem, amióta visszajöttem Brüsszelből, azóta sokat kopott az angolom. És talán itt most fontos az, hogy viszonylag pontosan tudjak fogalmazni. Azzal is kezdeném, hogy a ügyben a mentségeim közé tartozik, hogy azon túl, hogy tehát nem magyar parlamenti képviselői mi voltomból van ismeretem erről a dologról. Azt hiszem, hogyha az ember a magyar parlament alapján tájékozódna a bevándorlási politikáról, akkor meglehetősen egységű kép alakulna ki. Dolgoztam 3 évet Niedermüller Péter mellett Brüsszelben, kimondottam bevándorlási és menekültügyi kérdésekkel. És azt kell mondanom, hogy kénytelen vagyok olyan dolgokat is mondani, talán pont emiatt a tapasztalat miatt, ami attól félek, hogy ebben a teremben sem lesz különösebben népszerű. Az első dolog, amit mondani szeretnék, az az, hogy ebben az ügyben nincsen könnyű út. Nincsenek könnyű válaszok. Az az elképesztő, dehumanizáló és ostobán hazudozó kampány, amit a magyar kormány kétségkívül élen jár, de ami azért számos társa van Európában, az óhatatlanul a progresszív oldalon kihozza az ellenkező reflexeket. Tudniillik azt, hogy ezt a kérdést kizárólag humanitárius és emberi jogi kérdésként vizsgáljuk. Ez teljesen természetes reakció, de mégis azt kell mondanom, hogy ez nem egy járható útja az ügy kezelésének. Ha nem vetünk számot azzal, hogy a menekültügynek, vagy a migrációs kérdéseknek van egy sor más vonatkozása is. A kulturális vonatkozásoktól a munkaerőpiacra gyakorolt hatáson keresztül, vagy a szociális rendszer terhelésén keresztül egészen bizony a biztonsági kérdésekig, akkor olyan zsákutcába tudjuk vinni a saját politikánkat, amely teljesen hiteltelenné válik az európai közvélemény és választók számára. Olyan buborékot hozunk létre, ahol mi egymást biztosítjuk arról, hogy mire elképesztően jó emberek vagyunk mindannyian, akik tisztelik a nemzetközi jogot, az emberi jogokat és az emberi méltóságot, csak nem lesz válaszunk a valódi élet valódi problémáira. És engedjétek meg, hogy ebből a szempontból beszéljek néhány szót arról is, ami ebben egyébként szerintem rendkívül gondolatébresztő és rendkívül erősen összeszedett, koncentrált pozíciópapírban van. Hadd kezdjem én is a végéről, és a vége az integráció ügye. Mert azért a valós problémáinknak a bevándorlással és a menekültekkel szembeni ellenérzésnek az alapvető, vagy egyik alapvető oka az az integráció változó sikere. Miközben nyilvánvalóan ostobaság az, amit a kormány el akar velünk hitetni, mondom itt azon, akik ezt nem ismerik, amelyik ugye arról szól, hogy Hegyeshalomtól nyugatra egészen az óceánig egy nagy no-go zóna van, ahova fehér keresztény ember nem teheti be a lábát, anélkül, hogy megtámadnák vagy megegyék. De hát mégiscsak az a helyzet, hogy ugyanakkor azért ez az integráció vegyes sikereket hoz. Aki olvas irodalmat, aki ismeri a nyugat-európai viszonyokat, az tudja, hogy miközben elképesztő mennyiségű pozitív példa van. És ugye ezekről nem beszélünk. Tehát a sikertörténetekről, azokról az esetekről, amikor beilleszkednek, és gazdagítják a társadalmat az ilyen-olyan logikán érkező bevándorlók. De ugye azt sem lehet tagadni, hogy egyébként meg időnként nem sikeres ez az integráció. Nem lehet tagadni azt, hogy maradnak olyan zárványok, amelyek egyébként akár jogi értelemben sem felelnek meg az európai elképzeléseknek és különösen nem felelnek meg éppen azoknak a progresszív liberális ideáknak, amik mellett kiállunk. És azért, hogy ebben egy picit az Európai Uniót is pisztergáljam, azért nagyon erősen van az a jelenet, ez ilyen 2014 vége körül volt, amikor a következő időszak menekültügyi alapjának felhasználásáról és integrációs alapjának a felhasználásáról volt szó, és néhány európai parlamenti képviselő egy konferencián fölvetette azt, hogy miután láthatóan, akkor ez lesz már 2015, előttünk van a migrációs válság, nagy számban fognak érkezni menedékkérők, talán kellene több forrást biztosítani egyébként éppen a helyi közösségeknek arra, hogy az integrációhoz több lehetőségük van. Erre azt mondta az illetékes főigazgató, ez egy nagyon fontos, kiváló ötlet, majd amikor a 2020 utáni költségvetést tervezzük, akkor figyelembe fogjuk venni ezeket a szempontokat. Tehát ezzel azt akarom mondani, hogy az a típusú európai reakció, amelyik a menekültpolitikát helyesen közös európai ügyként kezelte, és a bevándorlás politikában is valami fajta koordináció irányába halad, de közben az integrációt lényegében ráhagyta a tagállamokra, ez szükségképpen egy sor feszültséghez vezetett. És hogyha ezen nem változ az Európai Unió, bár most ebben nagyon komoly változások vannak az új költségvetési időszakban, nem mennék most bele ismét a kormánypropaganda elemzésébe, bár van rá szókincsem, akkor ebben az ügyben hosszú távon ez egy vesztes meccs lesz, amelyik szét fogja feszíteni az egész európai liberális konszenzust, vagy már szétfeszíti. Mi az, ami nagyon rokonszenves nekem ebben a papírban, és erről nem beszélnék többet, de önmagában az egész integrációs kérdésnek a központba állítása, és ezen belül a helyi megközelítésnek a támogatása, ez rendkívül fontos. Ha van menekült és migrációs ügyben Európának fontos ügye, vagy fontos program kellene legyen, akkor az a helyi közösségek integrációs tevékenységének támogatása kell, hogy legyen. Ez nem kormányügy elsősorban, hanem közösségépítési feladat, amiben a városok tudnak sikeresek lenni, és gyakran sikeresek is. Nem mennék bele abba az ellenmondásba, hogy időnként olyan városok is sikeresek, amik nemzeti szinten egyébként rendkívül lelkesen tudnak a migráció ellen érvelni, és olyan pártokra szavaznak közben, amelyek migráció ellenesek. Ami az európai bevándorláspolitikával kapcsolatos, mi az, amivel egyetértek? Rendkívül fontosnak, először is szeretném aláhúzni és nagyon erősen támogatni azt, hogy nincs Schengen közös bevándorláspolitika nélkül. És közös menekültpolitika nélkül. Nincsen. Tehát el kell dönteni. Lehet azt mondani, hogy senkinek semmi köze ahhoz, hogy egyébként kilépi át a magyar határt, de ez azt jelenti, hogy akkor ott hagyjuk Schengent. Mert egyébként, ha élvezni akarjuk a szabad utazást, a szabad mozgást, akkor ez azzal is jár, hogy közös felelősséget vállalunk azért, hogy kit engedünk be, és közösen veszünk részt a határok őrzésébe. Enélkül nem működik a történet. Ugye ezt kipróbáltuk 2015-ben, legyen világos, Schengen ott egy rendkívül súlyos sebet kapott, amiből ma se épült föl. Ez persze nem csak Magyarország problémája, de Magyarország problémája is. Mi az, amivel nem értek egyet? Az állandó menekült elosztási kvóta egy tévedés. Abból indul ki ugyanis, hogy a menedékkérő az egy ilyen statikus cucc, amit lerakunk egy országba, oda betonozzuk, azt ott marad. De ez nem így van. A menedékkérő nem akar, lehet, hogy Magyarországra érkezik, de nem akar itt maradni, és hogyha ide küldjük Németországból, akkor se fog akarni itt maradni. Ezzel a megoldással azt a rendkívül kiterjedt szürke zónát növelnénk meg, ami egyébként ma is létezik menekültügyben. Na de ezzel az alapvető probléma az, hogy természetesnek tekintjük azt, hogy a menekültügyi eljárás úgy néz ki, hogy évekig tart maga az eljárás, majd utána, aki beérkezett, azt vagy integráljuk, vagy nem, vagy eltűnik, miután megérkezett, akit kiutasítanak, azt vagy kiutasítjuk, vagy inkább eltűnik szintén ebben a rendszerben. Miért kell ennek így lennie? Miért nem lehet egy hatékony menekültügyi eljárás, uniós szabályokkal és uniós támogatással, és persze nem sértve a tagállamok lelkét és jogköreit, amelyik nem évekig tart, hanem mondjuk hónapokig, és miért nem lehetnek utána olyan integrációs politikák, amik tudomásul veszik azt a realitást, hogy nem csak az uniós állampolgár, de a menedékjogot kapott ember is költözhet az Európai Unión belül. Neki sincs rokhoz kötés. Amikor az Európai Unió nagy erőfeszítéseket tesz a úgynevezett másodlagos mozgás megakadályozására, azért, hogy védje a nyugat-európai országok szociális rendszereit, akkor azon kívül, hogy elég önző, ezen kívül egyébként ráadásul hát vizet lapától villával, mert hogy értelmetlen a dolog. Ez nem tud működni, de egyébként arra jó, hogy meg lehessen nyugtatni nyugat-európai választókat, hogy majd nem csak ti fogtok foglalkozni a migránsokkal. Végül még egy elemre szeretném fölhívni a figyelmet. És ez tudom, hogy olyan lesz, amit itt sokan nem fogtok szeretni, mert a Fidesz is gyakran hivatkozik erre. De a Európán kívüli menekültekkel és migránsokkal kapcsolatban valóban, és az ő megítélésükkel kapcsolatban valóban van kulturális különbség Közép-Európa és Nyugat-Európa között. Ha azt mondjuk, hogy az egység a sokszínűségben elvét valljuk, akkor ehhez az is hozzátartozik, hogy szembenézünk ezekkel az eltérő realitásokkal. És ez nem azt jelenti természetesen, hogy rá kell játszani és erősíteni kell az ismeretlenségtől való félelmeket Kelet-Európában is, vagy Közép-Európában is, erre kell politikát csinálni. Azt se jelenti, hogy tudomásul kell venni azt, hogy vannak Európában, Kelet-Európában olyan kormányok, amik, hát udvariaskodhatok, de hogy a nyugati, vagy a jobboldali sajtónak is adjak egy kis örömöt, szóval, hogy vannak olyan kormányok, amik lényegében egy rasszista politikára építik föl a menekültügy kezelését, és ebből csinálnak kormánypolitikát, erről nincsen szó. De arról van szó, hogy az ilyen típusú érzékenységeket okosan, párbeszéddel, megbeszéléssel, felvilágosítással, a különböző szempontok figyelembevételével kezelni kell. Nem lehet úgy tekinteni, hogy csak azért, mert Hollandiában vagy Franciaországban mondjuk természetes egy jelentős számú muzulmán közösségnek a jelenléte, ez úgy tekintjük, hogy ez nem lehet probléma, vagy nem okozhat gondot, vagy nem megbeszélendő kérdés Közép-Európában, ahol ez a jelenség nem létezik. Vagy eddig nem nagyon létezett. Nem igaz, hogy nem létezik, de kevésbé létezett, kevésbé látható a társadalomnak. Magyarán szólva több párbeszéd és több kölcsönös megértés szükséges ahhoz, hogy egy hatékony európai politikát lehessen csinálni. Köszönöm szépen.
Köszönjük szépen, thank you, Gergely. I didn't ask you to limit your opening statements, and of course there was no, I mean, taking away the microphone from opposition MPs is, we're not in Parliament, so we don't do that here. But any of the other two gentlemen would like to continue?
Sure, thank you very much. I'm going to continue in English, if that's fine, out of respect for our Dutch guest. And let me apologize for Katka Čekotelin, our leader of our EP list, not being here due to some recent developments. And let me begin by saying that the real tragedy is not the fact that Hungary had to accept 367 refugees last year. The real tragedy is that I have a 13-year-old sister, and when she was in her 4th year of primary school, and one of the classmates was leaving, the whole family was leaving to France, as it happens to many families in Hungary. Many classmates were asking that girl, "Aren't you afraid of the terrorists in France? Aren't you afraid that you will be attacked?" The problem is that in Hungary, not only has the Hungarian government wasted billions of euros actually in total now, when we look back across all of the years in the past 4 or 5 years, just to communicate about this issue. But the problem is also that there was a level of brainwashing that has significantly damaged Hungarian attitudes, not only towards Muslims, not only towards foreigners, but even towards each other moving to another European country. That's nonsensical, that's surreal, and that's not something that we signed up for when we joined the European Union 15 years ago. Talking about the issue of refugees and migration in particular. Firstly, let me also say that I'm not an expert on these topics. However, I myself have been essentially a migrant from an EU country multiple times in the United Kingdom, in Germany, and in Belgium. So I had some idea of the level of integration that has happened in those countries, at least with some people from the other side of the European Union. But what has happened in Hungary, I think, and what we have seen in the past years, is firstly that our systems for asylum seekers actually haven't been so bad. Our systems actually passed the test during the Yugoslav wars, for example. The Hungarian refugee system was not in such a bad state a few years ago. What has happened since then is the Hungarian government hasn't properly invested into the experts working in these fields, hasn't properly invested in the infrastructure in these fields, and therefore as a consequence, and because the Hungarian government had nothing better to do than to start and provoke a fight with Europe, they resolve to the action of building a fence and to the action of starting billboard campaigns. That did not in any way solve the whole question that we're talking about today. Essentially, hundreds of thousands of people still came across through Hungary without any proper control measures or regulatory measures, and they left to various other European countries wherever they wanted to. Essentially, the government provided even transport for them. So that is the reality that we're talking about. And the reality is that, and partially I'm going to agree with Mr. Arato, is that Hungarians are the people who are afraid of the unknown. We do particularly well in studies that measure how afraid one is of Pirezek, which is it is a non-existent group of foreigners, and the point of that study is simply to see whether something that is unknown is being considered as a threat. And yes, Hungarians consider unknown things as a threat. However, that does not mean that Europe wouldn't need a common answer for this, and that does not mean that Hungary wouldn't have to find and we wouldn't have to find our own part and role in solving this question. I think the first important disclaimer here is that one of the worst things that the Hungarian government has done is that the issue of migration and the issue of refugees has been conflated completely, and these two things are really not the same. So that's the first thing that I think we really need to significantly clear up. If there would need to be a communication campaign on anything, it would be this, that refugees and migrants are not exactly the same, and there are many types of migration, and they need to be distinguished and they need to be treated differently in order to solve this problem. You cannot simply say for all people coming from a foreign country that, you know, you're a migrant, therefore you will be treated this way. These people need differentiated treatment. What we stand for is that we need a common answer on 3 pillars. And these 3 pillars are security, humanity, and European solidarity. I think the security aspect is fairly evident, and no one really challenges the question that yes, there needs to be a proper monitoring process, and yes, ideally, this also leads to the fact that we will have law-abiding people in our countries. That's a bare minimum. What we don't see in Hungary is the second aspect. We don't see humanity happening at our borders. We didn't see humanity at the fence at all. That's something that we definitely need to work on. What we don't see is that because the government is mentioning security all the time and is keeping people at the border simply for procedural purposes for months and months, they are treating those people terribly, and we don't see a common European answer for this. We don't see any opportunity right now how we could guarantee that people who actually want to go through proper procedures and want to apply for asylum, people who want to enter the country the way it is written in the law, those people are not treated fairly, and that is a problem, and that's a problem that needs to be addressed on a European level, because it is unacceptable that European countries that subscribe to European values allow themselves to treat refugees this way. The third part is European solidarity, and perhaps this is also the part where I'm going to join the debate on quotas. And it's great that so far we heard 2 viewpoints on what an ideal quota system would be like. Let me provide a third point of view, and that is that if national governments want to have a so-called national sovereignty over how many people they are willing to accept each year, each quarter, etc., we need a European answer that is flexible. We need a European answer that allows for them to the exact problem with the system is that Europe always thinks, I mean, let's just look at our budget. We think in 7-year budgets and stuff like that. There are certain crises and there are certain happenings that you cannot prepare for on a 7-year basis. I think that's a lesson that Hungary, at least economically, has learned very well during the past 50 years and under a socialist regime. You cannot write 5-year plans, and you definitely cannot do that on the issue of immigration. What we need instead is a flexible system. We need to find a common European level of quotas that countries can agree on, but then we need to allow countries to engage with each other and say, if I'm not willing to accept this many refugees this year, would you be willing to take them? We need that kind of interaction to happen between countries. We need countries to talk to each other. We need countries to negotiate with each other and discuss who is more willing and able to integrate refugees at a certain point of time. And I mostly talked about refugees now. That's predominantly because I think that is something that in this debate is always being overlooked. Of course, there's also a large question about migration more broadly. But I really wanted to stress this point, and I really wanted to stress the differentiation. So if we want to discuss migration further, then I'm open to debate on all aspects.
Thank you, Miklos. And last but not least, Péter Ungár, how do you feel about what was said, both in the first panel and then in the following discussion?
Thank you very much for the opportunity. Is this working? Yes, okay. I would just like to start for our Dutch guest to illuminate why was probably invited to this panel, is to cause some debate, as I will be in not so much agreement with the previous two speakers. And I think less for my fellow member of parliament, Orato, who, by the way, is sitting next to me, than he would find it politically convenient. I would like to start with the statement that I think is not in disagreement with what was previously said, but something that we should say. I think first of all, let's start with the fact that there is no such human right that anyone can live wherever they wish. This human right doesn't exist. It has been conflated that everyone who moves because of legitimate reasons has to find a place in Europe. I don't think this is the case. The case is that the old post-World War refugee system, which, by the way, is not capable of solving solutions of the 21st century, such as climate change, is a temporary system and the system of the first secure country where the war broke out or where this problem occurred. Well, Hungary and the Netherlands is not the first secure country from Syria. That is a fact. If there will be, and there could be, a war in the Ukraine, we think this is solved, but this is not solved. From the Ukraine, Hungary is indeed the first secure country. It's a neighboring country. So then we would have to take a large amount of migrants, for example, from a Ukrainian crisis. The second thing I want to say is that I disagree with the statement that there is no migration crisis because not many people actually migrated to Hungary. The migration crisis is not about the amount of people that have migrated to places. It is a crisis about the identity, the way politics is done in the European Union, and the crisis itself is a critique of the leadership of the European Union, which, by the way, and I'm saying this to my friends in Hír Televízió, by the way, was voted for by Fidesz and has a member on the commission who is a member of Fidesz party and was a minister of the Orbán government. This mismanagement and lack of decision-making caused the fact that people like the Hungarian Prime Minister can now be the alternative leadership of the European Union. The fence, which I agree with the existence of and I politically supported, the fence is popular amongst Hungarians because it symbolizes action versus the inaction of the Commission versus the inaction of the European leadership. That is why it is popular. That is why so many people voted in the quota referendum that Hungary had against mandatory quotas. It is, I think, ludicrous to say what my good friend Miklos said about the Fidesz thing, that Hungarians are racist and don't have enough information, and that is why they voted in these numbers. I disagree with that analysis. I believe that the reason people voted like that is because they wanted to signal their dissatisfaction with the way European politics were going. Just a couple other statements. Of course, the fact that people are migrating is not new. It is as old as world history. All the time, people went everywhere willy-nilly around places. People move. It's just the way things are. But the fact that people move here has to do with to the European Union, and I'm not saying here to Budapest, but to the European Union, has to do with two things. One is that this is partly the colonial past of Western European countries like the Netherlands, and the arms export and the way in which certain Western European industries profit from conflicts in the global South. These two things mean that indeed the West has to shoulder more of a burden for this in the European Union than Central and Eastern Europe. The fact that Slovakia, Slovenia, or Bulgaria had no colonies but were colonized means that they should shoulder less of a burden. And two things, finally. I was very happy that Arato Gergő said that the progressive side has slipped into this who is the best person in the room kind of debate with regards to this issue. I call my favorite type of argument, which makes me quite mad, is when people say that we are on the right side of history. It is exactly this kind of arrogance and the kind of moralistic way of speaking about this issue that meant that the people who feel that they are the losers of globalization, who feel that they have no economic or political power or decision-making capacities to influence the way in which our cities look like, our countries look like, the people who believe they have had no say, when we say these things, we radicalize them and we disallow a proper debate, not on the basis of these moralistic arguments, but on the basis of what kind of Europe we want. So I think that's a very, very dangerous thing. And the last thing, my problem with the government is that even though they were correct in identifying this issue as a problem, and as a problem of the identity of the European Union and the way politics is done, they have offered no alternative solutions. We still don't actually know what the migration policy is of Fidesz. When the 2015 crisis was occurring, what they said was, we need a common European defense, border defense, we need to give more money to Frontex, and now they decided, a couple of years later, that Frontex is the greatest enemy. They have absolutely no policy in this either. So the fact that they have managed to make this issue the fundamental issue of Hungarian politics and yet have offered absolutely no solution to this is, I think, partly our fault as the opposition to be self-critical, but it is also what we need to focus on. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter. You are, of course, invited because we like you, not just because we want a debate. Ladies and gentlemen, our time is very short, as always. Here's what we will do. I will now ask the senator to respond, and I will also have a question for him so that he can reflect. And then I will actually pass the floor to the audience for questions. I'm sure you'll have many questions, and I'm sure all our experienced politicians will find a way to say whatever they want as a response to your questions. Senator, first of all, you've heard our Hungarian guest's position. So, of course, I will give you time to respond to that. But two issues. First of all, so what is the D66 position on migration policy in the Netherlands? Is it right now? Because we understand the vision, but very specifically, what is it that you represent right now in the Netherlands with regards to integration, with regards to migration, with regards to quotas, or all those issues? And the second question, which I'm personally more interested in, D66 is a small to medium-sized party, depending on the elections. You've seen how cautious even those parties on the, let's say, more progressive part of the Hungarian debate are. Some parties even refuse to participate in debates on migration because they are afraid of the topic so much. What has been your strategy? What is the D66 strategy to come up, politically speaking, to do a progressive liberal policy? Is it you basically say the same things, just the Netherlands is different, so there's bigger constituency for that? Or do you have a secret recipe of how you can actually maintain and in some elections even grow a progressive liberal policy based on such migration policies? Now you have so many questions that the floor is yours. Whichever.
Okay. Well, it's very interesting to listen to the different speakers. One of the striking similarities with our politics is that every country believes that it is so special, that it should be organized differently, and that the international principles should also be explained differently for circumstances to be explained. And I think to a large degree, yes, there are differences, there are regional differences, there are national differences, but I think the world has developed over time into agree on certain international standards and human rights. And you are right, it's not a human right to live everywhere, but there are certain rights on the treaties how to deal with people asking for that and to figure out whether they are entitled or not. Now, on I think the most fundamental issue is how to fight for your ideals and your political values. I think the biggest fear is the fear itself. If we're not able and not daring to confront the public with our views on it, but all the time being strategically counting on whatever is be accepted or not, then we are underestimating the intelligence of the public. There is, by any opinion poll in Europe, which is objectively run, if possible, but that normally it is possible. There is a large majority in the community open to a decent humanitarian policy, also accommodating refugees or the legal migration. But at the same time, it's everywhere the same issue, that if politicians want to capitalize on fear, they are successful and they will expand their success. And with the success of capitalizing on fear, they can introduce all kinds of measures, curbing the minorities, curbing opposition in the name of security, because security is in the same area of fear. And so our strategy is to be opposing. When, in fact, if you look at the 10 years ago, 13 years ago, when the first right-wing politics by Geert Wilders came up, we were the first to stand up against him. And it was not by political assessment or opinion polls. No, we believed that we had to. And in fact, we gained support. We gained support up to a point that we became the second party in the elections, local elections. And then we became the biggest party in the European elections. And now we're part of government, so we're going up and down. This is to say, yes, your conscious views can be successful politically. Now, on the issues that have been raised right, left, and center on the European issue, on the European community, we were chairman. The Dutch government was chairman in 2016. I have been participating in several conferences in Brussels and elsewhere. Very, very disappointing. Very, very disappointing. And one of the disappointments is there is no public space. There is no common space in Europe where we speak the same language. Actually, we're speaking the language of the country that is now Brexiting. I mean, we have difficulty find common ground on all kinds of things. Yet there is something very, very powerful. Each time we are able to resolve issues, each time we are able to progress a little bit, then we slide back and we progress a little bit. And I think that's why I'm still believing in that we should continue. And yes, we can point out that the immigration policy is not fair. We can point out that we have a ridiculous budget system for 7 years on a minor budget for the European. I mean, it's a minor budget. That's the real issue. We should increase the budget. Very unpopular in Holland. Very unpopular. We are campaigning for it. I think we're the only one. I think we'll be successful in the end of the day, because after 2 years of negotiation, I promise you the budget will be raised. It will increase. And that's what I mean by trying to talk. The language of fear is European budget should not increase because the people don't want. No, they do want it, because they do want money in the local communities to increase and to work on community building. And that's my closing statement. I was last week in Bratislava. I met your chairman, Keuver, of the assembly. We were invited as the Benelux countries for the Visegrad countries to give our view. And I think I can summarize the views that I have expressed there, and I repeat here, is if you want to build as a Visegrad 4 or as a regional power, you can never build on a no. That's the easy one. On a no to migration. You can only build on a yes. There starts the diversity, there starts the complications, but you have to build on that. That's how Europe has been built. That's how the Benelux has been built. It's not easy, but the no policy is a dead-end street. And the Fidesz no policy of fear is a dead-end street. It will be a dead-end street, to the big disappointment of all the people that you don't want to tell that fear is the worst thing to fear.
Thank you. Thank you so much for those words. Ladies and gentlemen, we have 25 minutes in our session, which is very good, because then we have time for questions. In the meantime, I will ask you to sign our signatures for those of you who didn't do that, and my colleagues will distribute that. It's really important for us to demonstrate that you were actually here. It doesn't go to the Hungarian authorities, so you don't have to be afraid. Well, don't say that, because then now they won't sign it. Ladies and gentlemen, questions and comments, if you have any. Of course I do, but 1, 2, let's see. And we'll collect some of those. És természetesen magyarul is lehet kérdezni. You can ask your questions in either English or Hungarian.
Kell a tolmás nem fogja tudni fordítani.
So my first question is for Arató Gergely Arató, úgyhogy magyarul mondom most tovább. Amikor arról beszél, hogy Niedermüller Péter mellett dolgozott az érintett témákban, akkor valószínűleg láthatta azt, hogy Törökországban például a migráció vagy a migráció folyamata az egy kőkemény politikai zsarolási potenciális volt. És amikor azt mondja, hogy a migráció kérdésének a megoldása hasonlóan kell, hogy működjön, vagy hasonló elvek mentén működhetne, mint mondjuk egy schengeni összgondolkodás, akkor ez viszont indukál olyan tényezőket, olyan kérdéseket, hogy akkor mi van egy közös külpolitikával, mi van egy közös hadsereggel, ezek mennyire forró témák, mennyire lehet ezt, vagy kell végig gondolni ezt ilyen kérdések mentén.
Két kérdésem van. Az egyik az, hogy nem hangzott el arról semmi, hogy itt a problémáknak mennyiben okozója az, hogy itt az elmúlt 1-2 évben, valószínűleg egy időre lezengve, egy tömeges migráció történt. Nem az a fajta normális, idézőjelben rendszeres, bizonyos mértékig kiszámítható számokra és irányokból érkező migráció, mint ami 15 előtt volt. Ez az egyik kérdésem. Szóval ez valahogy, mint hogyha kimaradt volna mindenkinek a gondolkodásából. A másik kérdésem pedig az, hogy hát egyéni alapon történik ez a migráció, vagy a tömegeket veszik fel, csoportokat veszik figyelme. Úgy, mint a magyarok, befogadták a kunokat, a besenyőket, és mit tudom én kiket. Európának a migráció, tehát a migránsok között mennyiben lehet válogatni, mennyiben nem lehet válogatni, mennyiben gondolják azt, hogy ez teljesen individuális alapon, vagy mennyiben, hogyha így átszakadnak a gátok, esetleg a tömeges migrációt is el kell fogadni.
Szerintem az Európán belüli migráció egy kicsit kimaradt ebből a vitából eddig, mert beszélünk arról, hogy Európába áramlanak migránsok tömegei, viszont Kelet-Európa néptelenedik el, mert a Promised Land az Nyugat-Európa, és Magyarországról is több mint 500 000 ember, nincsenek pontos számok, az elmúlt években Nyugat-Európába távozott, és nem menekült, hanem gazdasági alapon. Tehát, hogy azt gondolom, hogy egy kis, nyilván a szociális Európa és egy európai kohézió az segítene ennek a problémának a megoldásában, de hogy ezt lehet egy kicsit együtt kezelni, vagy figyelembe venni ezt a folyamatot is. Köszönöm.
I will let you then answer these questions, and then if we have time, we will have more questions. If we don't, then we won't. I don't know who would like to go first. Gergely.
Konkrétan hozzám is volt kérdés, bár azt hiszem, hogy ez mindannyiunk számára fontos kérdések voltak. Az első kérdésre is most már próbálok nagyon rövid lenni, hogy kárpótoljak mindenkit az előző bűneimért. Tehát először is igen, teljesen nyilvánvaló módon nem lehet a migrációt, és különösen a menekültügyet, inkább most a menekültügyet nem lehet a kiváltókok kezelése nélkül érdemben kezelni, mert hogy egyébként olyan tömeges folyamatok indulnak be, amelyeknek a kezelése szinte lehetetlen. Ezért ugye, amikor mi azt mondjuk, hogy Európai Egyesült Államok kell, akkor azt is mondjuk, hogy közös külpolitika és közös védelmi képesség kell, jóval erősebben, mint ahogy ez ma működik. Másodszor, és azért még egy szálat hagy tegyek hozzá, amit közben fölmerült a vitában, amikor arról beszélünk, hogy közösséget kell építeni annak érdekében, hogy a ideérkezők befogadása működhessen, elsősorban helyben, ez a közösségépítés persze nem csak nekik szól, hanem szól egyébként annak a nagyon kiterjedt roncstársadalomnak, amit mi itt ismerünk a magyar vonatkozásaiban, de egyébként van ezen kívül is. Én azt gondolom, hogy egy jól működő, integrált társadalom képes arra, amelyik a saját polgáraival is tisztességesen bánik, akkor is, ha szegények vagy kisebbségiek, hogy egyébként a bevándorlókkal érdemben foglalkozzon. És részben ez a válaszom oda is, anélkül, hogy most elmennék ebbe a belső vándorlás ügyben, hogy egyébként nem csak Európa és a környezetek között van szociális feszültség, hanem Európán belül is kezelhetetlen szociális feszültségek vannak. Ezért mondjuk aztán, bocsánat, hogy még egy pillanatra utalok erre a történetre, hogy az Európai Egyesült Államoknak egy jóval erősebb szociális kiegyenlítő politikát kell csinálnia annak érdekében is, hogy ne erősödjenek fel ezek a vándorlási folyamatok, mert hát Magyarország nem csak a bevándorlóknak nem az ígéret földje, hanem a magyaroknak se az ígéret földje, és azért ez még sincsen így rendben. A tömeges migrációra vonatkozó kérdésre szerintem részben az a válasz, hogy egyrészt meg kell próbálni gyökereiben kezelni, és sok szempontból lehet nem szeretni az EU-török megállapodást, de az, hogy nem kezelte az Európai Unió, és nem foglalkozott ezzel, mielőtt elindult volna ez a hullám, az nyilvánvalóan rendkívül súlyos hiba volt, de olyan rendszert kell kiépíteni, menekültügyi és határvédelmi rendszert, ami ilyen rendkívüli kihívásokat is képes kezelni. Köszönöm szépen.
Thank you. On the Turkey issue, the Dutch chairmanship was active in doing that and in sealing the deal, which was, I think this is a very cultivated country. You know the figure of Faust. It was a Faustian pact. There was the idea that this had to be controlled in one way or the other, and the most neighboring country who could be controlling it was Turkey. So this was a pragmatic solution to an unmanageable problem. But we tend to forget that there are 3 million Syrians in Turkey, that there are about 2 million in Lebanon, and that so the neighboring countries are really bearing the trouble of the war in Syria, and to a smaller extent in Europe. Now and that I think the word mass migration is also, we have to be careful with mass. What is mass? I think if you look at the figures, I wouldn't call it mass, but it's a word that appeals to the public. You could call that in 1965 we had a mass migration from Hungary, and we had a lot of Hungarians and friends of my parents actually and children that integrated in the Netherlands, became very well respected citizens. I think that was it. That was also, and then generally a case of very successful integration. Well, within Europe, social Europe, and the Dublin Agreement. I think we have to, and we work on it, on the amendment of the Dublin Treaty on how to deal with migration on an individual right, on an individual case. It's stuck. It's difficult. It's not progressing. We have to be fair about it. It's not progressing. It has to. And like everything in Europe, at some point there becomes a crisis. As you ask, wasn't it predictable? Some crises are predictable, but still in politics, it has to happen first before people act. It's very unfortunate, but that's often how it is. Now, on social Europe and the migration within Europe, I mentioned the Hungarian case in the past, but actually a lot of a substantial part of the Dutch agriculture export is depending on Polish workers. Our famous tomato export could not be done without Polish workers. And there's a fierce debate every time. We just had recent local elections where a party you could say, anti-migration party locally won substantial numbers, about 14%, substantial. And they won also, and that's the interesting case, in the area where they are dependent on Polish workers. And why is that? Because they focus on the housing problems. And these housing problems have been expanded and been publicized and been exploited by certain politicians. And forgetting the other part of it, which is they cannot produce tomatoes without Polish workers. Now that's the situation in many parts of Western Europe. So we are in a way interdependent already. And we can deny it for purposes of political local success, but in the end of the day, it will not work. Yes, we have to work on a social Europe. I'm in favor of that. We have been visiting the European Commission. We have been discussing it, even with Juncker. He's very much in favor of it. But here comes the issue: sovereignty. People don't want it to happen. They don't want sovereignty. Now, let me say 2 words on sovereignty, because it hasn't been mentioned this morning. I'm very much in favor of the way that President Macron in France looks at sovereignty. A traditional, very sovereign country like France. And he says the way we have to look at sovereignty is that the French people can only live and fully enjoy their sovereignty in a Europe that is working together, an integrated Europe, because the national sovereignty within border is meaningless. Not entirely meaningless, but it's highly symbolic.
Thank you so much. Miklós, now that I give the floor to you.
Köszönöm szépen. A kérdéseket magyarul kaptam, szóval akkor válaszolni is magyarul fogok. Elnézést kérek a holland barátainktól. Hátulról kezdeném, volt egy kérdés az EU-n belüli migrációval kapcsolatban, pontosabban a kivándorlással kapcsolatban. Én itt visszautalnék azokra az economistos adatokra, amiket Hesselmans asszony is a prezentációjában mutatott azzal kapcsolatban, hogy Magyarországon az egyik legnagyobb a vállalatok körében azoknak az aránya, akiknek fejfájást okoz a munkaerőhiány, több mint 50%, illetve arra a demográfiai problémára is, hogy kb. 10% a várható népességcsökkenés a következő 20 évben. Ezek a problémák megoldhatóak lennének jelentős mértékben azzal, hogyha meg tudnánk fordítani a kivándorlási hullámot. A kivándorlási hullám megfordítására talán még annyira sem próbált válaszkísérletet tenni a kormány, mint amennyire a migrációval foglalkozik. Tehát ez jelenleg teljes mértékben ignorálva van. Ugye hallottunk egy Gyere haza fiatal programról, rövid életű volt és sikertelen. Ezen kívül más érdemi megoldása, válasza a kormánynak jelenleg erre nincs. Valószínűleg egyébként ez nem szintisztán egy politikai kérdés, és nem is szintisztán egy gazdasági kérdés. Azoknak az embereknek a jelentős része, aki kimegy, felmerül a fejükben, hogy azért, hogyha fiatalként kimegyünk 20 évesen, azért felmerül a fejünkben, hogy családot hol alapítsunk. És hogyha a gyerekeink Londonba fognak iskolába járni, akkor már nem fognak soha olyan jól magyarul beszélni, mint hogyha Magyarországon járnának iskolába. És szerintem nagyon szívesen járatnák egy csomóan Magyarországon iskolába a gyerekeiket, ha lenne annyi bizalmuk a magyar oktatási rendszer felé, hogy abból ugyanolyan jól kerülhetnek ki, mint az angolból, vagy bármelyik másból. Tehát ez szerintem egy összetettebb kérdés annál, mint sem, hogy például a bérek mikor veszik fel a versenyt a nyugat-európai színvonallal. Egészen biztos, hogy abban is van hova fejlődnünk, de én hangsúlyoznám azt, hogy mind a kórházak, mind az iskolák terén akkora lemaradásban vagyunk, hogy egyszerűen azokat a területeket is priorizálnia kell a kormánynak ahhoz, hogy valaki azt mondhassa, hogy Magyarországon élni szeretne. Nem csak dolgozni, hanem ténylegesen élni. Az élethez kellenek ezek az alappillérek. És ezekre túlságosan kevés pénzbefektetés jutott az elmúlt években, ami egyébként EU-s forrásokból is megoldható lett volna, hogyha megfelelően osztjuk be. Reméljük, hogy a következő ciklusban ez változni fog. A második kérdés a tömeges bevándorlással kapcsolatban, hogy erre hogyan lehet felkészülni, ez pont az a fajta rugalmasság, amire próbáltam célozni, amikor azt mondom, hogy a tagállamok közötti megállapodásnak is helyet kell hagyni. Tehát persze szükség van egy európai megállapodásra, de hogyha egy tagállam azt mondja, hogy ő nem elkészül arra, hogy most hirtelen befogadjon több 10 000 embert, akkor egy másik tagállam pedig azt mondja, hogy refugees welcome, mint ahogy Angela Merkel mondta, akkor képesnek kell lenni az Európai Unión belül ciklusok közben is felülírni ezeket a megállapodásokat, ahogy éppen az adott tagállamok között ezek megszületnek. Hogy válogatni lehet-e, amennyire én értettem, a holland javaslat is arról szól, hogy például amikor munkaügyi vagy oktatási vízumokról van szó, akkor abszolút lenne egy szelekció. Szerintem arról nincs szó, hogy menekült kérdésben fenn kéne tartani ezt a szelekciót, tehát viszont az emberi jogat, az mindenkit megillet, főleg akkor, hogyha az első biztonságos országról beszélünk, ami mondjuk lehet, hogy kelet felől nem áll meg, de dél felől megállhat, hogyha esetleg ott eszkalálódna a helyzet Afrika északi országaiban, akkor igenis megállhat az a kritika, hogy befogadónak kell lennünk csoportosan is, de egyébként én is támogatom az egyéni szelekciót és egyéni ellenőrzést, elbírálást. És akkor felmerül az első kérdés, ugye vonatkozott közös külpolitikára, hadseregre, és itt már egészen az Európai Egyesült Államokig szaladtunk, aminek nincs realitása jelenleg az európai politikában, viszont a közös európai hadseregre mindennél jobban szükség van. Tehát azt látjuk jelenleg, hogy a NATO-n belül egyrészt gyakorlatilag Amerikán meg Anglián kívül a többi tagállam nem nagyon tudja teljesíteni a kötelező vállalását. Másrészt az amerikaiak elköteleződése a NATO iránt is, még hogyha egyébként jelenleg most úgy tűnik, hogy adott kommunikációsan nagyon ellenkező, amit folyamatosan hallunk, tehát én azt mondom, hogy alsó hangon instabil ez a helyzet, és éppen ezért is szükség van arra, hogy legyen egy európai koordináció, legyen egy európai hadsereg, ami nem jelenti azt, hogy a nemzeti honvédelmet a kukába dobjuk, épp ellenkezőleg ez azt jelenti, hogy a különböző államok kooperálnak egymással, közösen gyakorlatoznak, közös eszközöket használnak. Az európai hadsereg egyébként azt is jelenti, hogy európai hadipart fejlesztenénk, ami végre fel tudná venni a versenyt az amerikai hadiparral, vagy még egyébként a valamennyire létező brit hadiparral. Ezek mind olyan területek, amelyekre egyébként fókuszálhatna Európa, és amelyekre jobban érdemes befektetnünk a jövőben. Azt gondolom, hogy ennek egyébként lennének technológiai hozadékai is, kéz a kézben mozogja ez gyakorlatilag ma már az informatikával, tehát itt nem arról van szó, hogy huszárokat szeretnénk képezni, hanem drónokról van szó, arról van szó, hogy adatbiztonság, és így tovább, és így tovább. Ezek olyan 21. századi kérdések, amelyekre érdemes válaszokat keresnünk, és amelyekre érdemes közösen válaszokat keresnünk, mert nem feltétlenül a magyar honvédelemnél lesz minden szaktudás ezzel kapcsolatban.
Szépen Miklós. Péter?
Igen, eszembe egy ilyen új skifire gondoltam, a huszár jellegű robotokra. Ezt igazából csak a Csaba miatt mondom, hogy a tömeges migráció kapcsán csak annyit szeretnék mondani, hogy én szerintem történelmi távlatból tekintve azért ilyen sokszor volt már, hogy tömegesen mozogtak emberek helyekről, főleg, hogyha háború van, tehát ez így előfordult. Szerintem ez nem összehasonlítható a mondjuk államhatárok kialakulása előtti kun, bunyevác, jász jellegű migrációra, mert ők nem egy már létező jegecesedett államból jöttek, egy létező nemzetállamból papírokkal, akkor még más jellegű volt ilyen szempontból a történet, tehát szerintem ez egy sántító párhuzam, de azt akartam mondani, hogy szerintem ez a új normális, ez a fajta tömeges migráció, a globalizálódó médiastruktúrával és olyanokkal, mint a klímaváltozás, ez lesz az új normális, tehát erre kell tudni felkészülni. Még annyit akartam mondani, hogy a török EU megállapodás abban az esetben szerintem a lehető legjobb döntés volt, tehát én szerintem az akkor egy jó döntés volt. Nem lehet tudni, hogy meddig fenntartható és hogy fenntartható, de ha már a magyar kormánynál tartunk, elég érdekes az a kritika, hogy semmit sem tett Angela Merkel a kérdés megoldásáért, de a tanácsülésen Orbán Viktor ódákat zengett a Merkel-Erdogan paktumról ugyanakkor.
Másodszorra, mert elsőre meg azt mondta, hogy nem támogatja.
Igen, de ez mondjuk mivel nem így volt. Tehát, hogy igen, de a végén megszavazta, és elmondta, hogy ez egy csodálatos dolog. Még az EU-n belüli migráció kapcsán valószínűleg az akkor is létrejött volna, hogyha mondjuk az EU-nak ilyen politikai struktúrái nincsenek, csak van egy ilyen gazdasági elszívó hatása. Tehát a jugoszláv vendégmunkásnak a intézménye az az ex-jugoszláv köztársaságok EU tagságát megelőzően is egy dolog volt. Ez egyszerűen a bérkülönbségből adódó alapvetés, és az, hogy a magyar kormány közben folytat egy neoliberális, én eldöntöttem, hogy ezt a szót kimondom, ha már itt vagyok, tehát folytat egy neoliberális gazdaságpolitikát, ami lent tartja a béreket, nem, azt most nem, az hozzájárul ahhoz, hogy Magyarország kibocsátó ország legyen, hiszen nincs jelentős bérfejlesztés, ezért ez a bérek közti különbség nem csökken, hanem nő, és ez a kibocsátás egyik alapvető oka. És én még két dolgokra szeretnék csak reagálni. Az egyik ez a közös európai hadsereg, honvédelem, Európai Egyesült Államok kérdéskör. A közös európai hadsereg szerintem jól hangzik, alapvetően lehetne támogatni, de ennek az lenne az alapfeltétele, hogy minden ország eléri a NATO vállalásban számított 2%-ot. Nem igaz, hogy azt a Donald Trump találta ki, hogy érjük el a 2%-ot, és ez egy ilyen amerikai külpolitikai doktrina volt. Ezt már az Obama kormány is elmondta, ezt Hillary Clinton, mint külügyminiszter is elmondta, meg előtte a republikánusok mindig. És ez egy alapvetően olyan dolog, amivel egyetértünk. Jó lenne, ha mi elérnénk ezt a 2%-ot, és jó lenne, ha Németország is megtenné ezt, illetve a többi NATO tagállam. Tehát én szerintem akkor lehetne bármilyen közös haderőről beszélni, hogyha mondjuk legalább a már lévő katonai szövetségben rendesen a vállalásainkat teljesítenénk. Ez természetesen nem úgy kapcsolódik a migrációs politikához, hogy akkor a NATO mindenhol, mint a Team America című családos filmben a világ rendőrségeként rendet tart mindenhol, és minden egyes globális krízist megold, mert ennek a végeredménye sokszor rosszabb, mintha ez nem történt volna meg. Tehát csak ezt akartam, és a végén arra, hogy igazából csak ezt annyit akartam még mondani, hogy persze, mondom, nem csak Ukrajnában, igaz ez Észak-Afrikára, vagy akármi történhet még a Balkánon is, vagy Törökországban, tehát sok minden lehet, és akkor az Európai Unió tagállamai lesznek az első biztonságos országok, és erre föl kell készülni. De akkor is jelenlegi létező, aláírt nemzetközi szerződésekkel, amik a menekültügyi eljárást kormányozzák, abban az van, hogy például a menekült státusz egy ideiglenes státusz, ami arra az időre vonatkozik, amíg a kibocsátó konfliktus meg nem szűnik. Senki sem gondolta komolyan, hogy most a 2015-ös tömeges migrációval mi ideiglenesen fogunk ezeknek az embereknek menekült státuszt nyújtani. Mindenki azt gondolta, hogy utána letelepednek, munkát vállalnak és gyermekeket vállalnak. Tehát azért a kettőt nem mossuk össze. Szerintem, ha az lett volna mondva, hogy bár mondjuk senkit sem tudunk, vagy nagyon nehezen tudunk embereket kiutasítani, de ha azt mondunk, hogy ez csak egy ideiglenes 2-3-4 évig tart, ameddig ez a kibocsátó konfliktus meg nem szűnik, akkor sokkal nagyobb támogatottsága is lett volna a tömeges bevándorlásnál, vagy tömeges migrációs krízisnél a menekültügyi eljárás.
Thank you, Peter. And our time is almost up, but I will ask you one last question, and I will ask you to limit your responses to 1 minute, or one sentence, actually. My question will be very easy. Well, then you can choose either one, as long as it's not more than 1 minute. You all we'll have European elections, and we'll have a new European leadership soon. You represent different parliamentary groups, different fractions. We have S&D, we have Greens, we have ALDE at the table. If there was one thing you wanted to highlight on what the new European leadership, whether it be Commission or Parliament, should do on the migration issue, the one most important thing that should be done, if it's, close the border, let everyone in, let everyone out, whatever, what would be that one thing that you would find the most important? And that will be my closing question.
Folytatni azt, ami az elmúlt 1-2 évben elkezdődött, egy erős, integrált határvédelem és közös európai menekültpolitika kiépítésével.
be prepared for the future and be prepared for change.
To do three things at one time is to reinforce the border, to revise the asylum system, the Dublin instructions, and to work on integration policies on the social level.
Hát a Dublini rendszert meggyilkolni és egy újat csinálni, ez az egyik. A másik pedig, hogy a kvóta alapú diskurzustól átvinni a probléma megoldásának, tehát a Európán kívüli probléma megoldására alakuló diskurzusba, és a segélyezési, Európai Unió segélyezési politikára költött pénzt megtöbbszörözni.
Köszönjük szépen. Thank you all, and I thank you so much for being here, ladies and gentlemen. Our first panel is now up. Let's give a big thanks for Miklós, Gergely, Joris and Péter. Thank you. És maradjanak velünk, most egy nagyon rövid ebédszünet, és utána a második szekciónk, amely még izgalmasabb és szakmai jellegűbb. Hát azt nem tudom, szakmai jellegűbb lesz. Köszönjük szépen.
Kicsit rosszul esett, de hát ez egy politika.
So thank you very much. So this is the second panel of our conference with our guests from NGOs and think tanks. Marta Hessemet from the Mr. Hans van Melo Stichting, who already presented their policy paper on migration. We have Szabolcs Janik here, who is the Deputy Director at the Migration Research Institute. András Kovács, who is an Assistant Research Fellow at the Hungarian Academy of Sciences, but he's also a Director of the Menedék organization. And finally, Timo Renke, who is the Project Director at the Friedrich Ebert Stiftung in Budapest. Thank you very much for your panelists. We are very happy to have you here. We had a panel, the first panel has been with politicians, and this is actually a panel of professionals and NGOs. But my first question would be if we talk about migration policies, if you talk about the refugee crisis, is it possible to not to be involved in political debates? So is it possible to have this NGO stance and has this professional stance and not to make politics if it comes to migration? Marta?
Thank you. It's work. Yes, now it's working. I think it's not only possible, I think it's crucial. I think it's very necessary. For example, when we were working on our publication, we made use of professionals, of academics, of nonprofits who had been working on different aspects of the migration questions. And that was for us very helpful. And of course, nobody is ever fully neutral. I think everybody has opinions, also academics who have been studying this, they come with their opinions. But I think it's extremely important to have as many different perspectives as possible, and also especially, perspectives from both the field, from people actually working with migrants, with refugees, people with migrant and refugee background themselves, as well as an academic perspective that is based on solid critical analysis. Statistics, I think, are important, though also we have to be very considerate of how we look at that, because statistics are very easily, I would say, manipulated. So, but to answer your question briefly, yes.
Szabolcs?
Well, I think it's not possible if we want to talk about possible solutions to the migration crisis, which is unfortunately not mentioned in this policy paper, or only implicitly mentioned, regarding the fact that the paper seeks alternatives to irregular migration to Europe, substituting them with legal channels, which is a legitimate point of view. But I think as a whole, the text lacks any serious references to what happened since 2014. If I read this paper in 2014, it could be the same as this version, which I think is a kind of problem with this paper. And we could mention also the fact that the text blurs the lines between asylum seeking and other migration types, migration for other purposes, for example, for work purposes. And it proposes the resettlement of asylum seekers by monitoring labor market demand across the EU and labor market supply, which is, I think, a very interesting approach. Why should we resettle asylum seekers who are later granted any type of national protection or not? But why do we mix in the picture labor market aspect? Because it's another channel. If we want workers, then we have to create them for them legal channels. But I think this has nothing to do with the fact that every people who come to the continent apply for asylum. I think this is mixing two problems or two aspects. So I think it's important to talk about in terms of politics about migration if we see the developments on the continent.
Thank you. I plan to come to these definitions and to different aspects or types of migration. But Timo, you're in a special position because you're from actually a foundation of a political party, but you are doing basically you're supporting civil societies. You're already in politics, but in our institute at the Friedrich Ebert Stiftung, you have an agenda, or you're trying just to understand migration?
It's a good question. I mean, of course, the objective is to be as neutral as possible on this regard, and this is, of course, what's only the possible solution to it. But I'm working since 2 years on this project, and you're so pulled into this political dialogue, identity politics, that it's really hard to move this out. But I mean, the work we still have, is to find a narrative that it's a pragmatic approach. I think this is also the name of the conference here. To what is the common approach, to find a narrative that involves as well the humanitarian aspect of this way, as well as also the security aspect, because there's also a demand of a majority society in many Central Eastern European countries that demand this. So I think to get all this energy out of this and to focus really on the facts I think it's the crucial issue. But in practical words, I would say we're failing on this because it's when you start with a list of facts, you can interpret them differently. So it's really difficult in this regard. However, it's not impossible. Yeah. So we're trying. I think there are some topics that is a common interest in migration. Of course, when you talk about refugees, it's extremely difficult, especially with a quota system. But I think when we look at other issues, and it was slightly mentioned in the session in the morning, with the demographic change, that there was a study from the ECFR 2 days ago, which mentioned that 40% of the Hungarians are more afraid of emigration and 20% are only of immigration. So I think the point that a lot of people are, due to human capital, maybe I don't like this word, is leaving this region, is something, I think that is something that unites us above all political parties. Of course, you can have different visions how to stop it, There's maybe you can have a family policy about it, maybe you can say you want more migrants about it, but I think in the end this is the same problem and everyone is concerned about this. So maybe there are some, when you look at legal ways, maybe there are some common ground in this regard. And I have some more ideas, maybe I can stop it here so far.
So I think when it comes to involved into politics, that's something else to manage the organization, I guess.
Yeah, I guess in a way, pretty much. But I was also thinking whether I could kind of combine the two identities you introduced me with, like being a researcher for the academy and also being a coordinator of a Hungarian NGO that essentially provides social welfare and integration-related services to immigrants in the country. I mean, the common denominator is maybe that. Both approaches are pretty much pragmatic. So either if you act as a researcher trying to understand what's going on around, or if you act as a service provider or a civil society organization, of course, you could be pretty political as civil society if you are more for advocacy, more for changing overall dispositions. But in all cases, it's slightly different. So being neutral is a crucial requirement. But actually what happens and what has happened for the past couple of years, it is almost the opposite. That what we found that however much we wanted to refrain from politicizing as much as we could, somehow politics came after us. So it's a way of sort of retreating, and I see it in both fields that remaining sort of untouched or uninfluenced by political developments, it is very difficult. And on the other hand, and reflecting on what you say, that you could even go for the opposite, I think you should tackle and you should look at politics in basically three main aspects, both as a researcher and as an NGO activist. One thing is, identifying the problems or framing your questions. What's going on in the political debate, or what are the developments are crucial in order to get an understanding of the situation. So in order to ask a good research question or to devise and design an appropriate intervention service, you need to understand what's out there. And then the next thing is actually I mean, setting the whole thing up. I mean, getting your information or devising your interventions, where you see that politics can be an awful lot of noise around you, but it can also be an awful lot of resource around you. Like, you know, you need to reflect on what's going on, what's being said, how people are reacting on things. And I mean, for instance, Menedik, which is a relatively neutral service providing organization, I mean, recently is very often denied access to certain areas or to certain institutions, not so much because a service is not needed, but because there is an uncertainty whether it is appropriate. I mean, whether it's politically paying off to associate with us or to work with us. So again, there is already a trade-off between, you know, the ideological fight out there and identity politics and the pragmatic use or disuse of services available. And the third issue is interpretation. So whatever happens, whatever you do and whatever you read or whatever data you find, I mean, what you make out of those, I think there is an awful lot of responsibility here along, again, political lines. You talked about statistics, and I think it's not so much about the ambiguity and blurriness of statistical data. There are methodological problems, but I think the big problems lie with the interpretation. So how you interpret what you see, what you emphasize, what you kind of hide away or skim over. I think these are the real issues, and this is what we are caught in, again, both as NGOs and as researchers. That, I mean, I'm kind of getting increasingly cautious of, for instance, watching my words or trimming how I express myself in a media interview or even in a public discourse like this. And this is what I mean of being increasingly political and politicized, even if you want to resist it, because you know that, I mean, from the efficiency of your work and services, probably this is not the best way of positioning yourself, neither as a researcher nor as a service providing organization.
Thank you. So at least if there's about a common ground, then this uncertainty about to be political or to be professional, that's something in common. But actually, the purpose of this roundtable talk is to find a liberal. Well, it is an interpretation, because in politics there are interpretations according to ideologies. So I think it's legit. But when it comes to common ground, the point of this roundtable talk was to find a common ground between West and East. But don't you think that when politicians, professionals, and NGOs, I don't think that it's really considered the historical and the social differences between East and West. I'm not sure if there's enough talk about it in Holland, or is it considered when it comes to anti-migrant sentiments in the new member states of the EU?
Sorry, I want to make sure I get your question right. You mean that it's to what extent we in the Netherlands consider sentiments in Eastern European countries?
The difference between East and West when it comes to a liberal asylum policy or refugee policy, or a common Europe-wide policy should be.
That's exactly why for us I think it's so important to be here, and that's actually also the question I have here to you and to my fellow panel members. Where indeed could we find our common ground? Like, one thing that I'm actually very curious to ask you, if that's okay, is that, so when you say, okay, I'm missing here the connection with the current politics, I'm missing the connection between this vision and what has been happening since 2015. So then I'm very curious to ask you if you can go to the essence, like what is it exactly that you are missing? What would you propose? And then maybe we can talk about where can we find common ground on that? And the same question for you. I'm sorry, I'm taking over your role here a little bit. That's okay. So, yeah. Thanks.
Well, if we admit that there's a migration crisis, or let's say a challenge in Europe concerning both Western and Eastern Europe, I think there must be found solutions. Solutions can be found and adopted best by politicians. So that's the point where politics comes in the picture. So I think any policy recommendations or aspects that are proposed by NGOs or other relevant players will finally be evaluated in the sphere of politics. And I think we are right and cautious if we take into account any aspect that could emerge. For example, the different historical, cultural, etc. background of Central Europe. I think we have to recognize the prevailing differences, either in terms of society, economics, historical background, etc. So I think seeking a very common asylum or migration framework for the whole EU, the EU 27, without Great Britain, I think is a kind of bad way to follow.
But sorry, there could be some common ground. So in the policy paper, there's been the starting point was human dignity. So these can be connected due to pan-European values.
No, nobody doubts those values. I think those are written in the Geneva Convention. Those are written in current EU law. Those are, and as a result, those are adopted and included in the relevant national legislations. So, okay, that's important to monitor the enforcement of these, whether these are true in reality. But I think these are common points, and no one would say, "Oh, no, these are not values we could accept." So okay, these are very, very important values to be followed and adhered to, but I don't think whether or if this could take us closer to final solutions.
Yeah, and actually the two issues maybe, and then we can get back to either of them. One, what you just raised about dignity, or we talked about common values. I think that's definitely a very, very firm and valid common ground, but probably, and this is what I was kind of missing. I know it's only a summary of a 130 pages paper, which yeah, I mean, I asked for it in Dutch, but then I realized that it's yeah, exactly. So I couldn't figure it out through my English and German combining, which was kind of my probably very much stereotyping guess. Nevertheless, I think we would need to talk about the interpretation of these. So what it means and what are the possible implications, and especially a discussion on dignity. I mean, it's a recurrent issue in migration debates and political debates around migration. And usually even conflicting parties reach the conclusion that none of them questions the essence of human dignity. But when it comes to, so what is, how does it imply when you implement your policies? So what qualifies for observing and respecting human dignity in case of very pragmatic decisions? And you were just starting with a very pragmatic question. Your second sentence of this summary is, it is clear who is allowed to enter and who is not, who can stay and who has to return. And I think it's a fair enough opening, which could probably incorporate every party here. But then why don't we talk a little bit more about these criteria here? So, okay, so what we think about those who must be allowed, those who could be allowed, those who should be excluded, or those who must be excluded. So I think these are the questions here. And when we revisit the question of dignity, then usually what I find that this argument don't convince people who otherwise oppose, for instance, opening up migration policies or entry regimes by simply referring to the human dignity of these people. Nobody denies the human dignity of those people who are actually kept in transit camps in Libya or paid off to keep them in Turkey, and or the other way around, who are waiting in a German reception center to be placed in a volunteering family to become members of the local community. So most likely the human dignity of these people are absolutely equal all across the board, and we still can argue along accepting some and excluding others. And I think these arguments are very much needed, because whenever we end up the discussion of that there are differences between Central Europe. We heard it in a previous panel that Central Europe was referred as something which is a very special region, and most likely there are specialties, just as specialties in the Benelux, just as specialties in the Mediterranean or in the Nordic countries. But let's move beyond that and start talking about these differences.
Yeah, Timo, if you'd like to reflect.
Yeah, I would just want to refer to Yannick's point with the solution is in politics. Yeah, but I mean, I completely agree with this. In the end, this is the only valid the power and legitimate power in this regard. But of course, currently we see a complete deadlock in politics in this regard. Huh? We see since the June summit of 2018, where we had a migration summit on the European level, you know, the reform of the Dublin system is stalled. I mean, everything is stalled. You know, you can really see dividing lines right through the continent. It's landlocked, of course. So what would be possible solutions to go this? Of course, in the end, it has to be politics. But I think I would just like to involve also new actors, which might have maybe a different approach in this regard. I think we have not talked really about local communes and communities, which might be more open. There, of course, they also involve some politics. There's local mayors involved. They might be way more open than the national government. And of course, I work for the German Political Foundation, and we had this cut also going through West and Eastern Germany, and of course the political saying we are a union since 30 years, but actually they're not. The wages are still different, 20%. People don't feel they're belonging to each other. So what actually integrates in is, of course, the unsatisfying factor of time. You know, it just needs time. Sometimes immigration needs time, 2 to 3 generations, sometimes even. But of course, it's also the dialogue between the people. And there local communities, communes can have a very important effect, I think. And I think also when we talk about immigration, it's also the small and medium-sized companies, you know, because they also have a lot of effect, and they are not very voicing their voice so often and loud, and they probably also have an interest why they don't want to make it so political. But I think they also have one of the strongest reasons why they are uniting people, because when people move, you know, east and west and work in these countries, they make their experience. They are also in demand of course, providing some services except from just work. But of course, that might be a really big help. And of course, this even in Hungary, I mean, of course, the people who are coming here from other countries, maybe in the IT sector, you know, there are some entry points that are maybe not so well known how people come here, but I think they have a really important role. And this is maybe something that they really want to stay out of this politics and keep it away. But that might be in the long run. I know it's maybe not satisfying because it takes really long time. Maybe the only way to have this bottom-up approach rather than currently, which is stalled on a political level.
Yeah, it's just one more thought, and also connecting on what you're saying about the criteria and what you were saying about, you know, these so-called differences between Western and Eastern Europe. I think one point of misunderstanding here, I think from a Western European perspective between brackets, is that I think for us it's sometimes hard to understand what is a country like Hungary willing to do for it. So, you know, I think we can agree on these basic principles, you know, indeed, the humanity as one. Then we have to talk about the criteria, very important, but I think we also need to talk about what are we willing to do and what do we need for doing that? And I think that's very much a core question when it comes to asylum policy. I think most of us can agree that there needs to be humane reception of refugees. But what are we as different European countries able to do? I think this goes back to the quota question. And I find it very interesting to hear these different perspectives on that question here, because I would like to know, okay, so if you not want to accept fixed quota, then what do you want? And also, how can we make that possible? I think that also goes back to, for example, the question of integration. That's often an argument that is used, like we cannot have all these people here because we don't have the facilities to integrate them in our society, and we are afraid that they will, you know, get into the margins or create problems. Then let's talk about what is necessary indeed to integrate that, and how can we as European countries work on that?
Thank you very much. So actually, I already mentioned that maybe we can. So okay, so we have we should talk about standards. Who should be let in? Who should be excluded? But also, I think it's also interesting to consider that, and I think it's also a question in Hungary, because when we talk about, so is it possible to talk about in Hungary, at least that was the debate, that there are political asylum seekers, political refugees, and economic migrants. And so this was, I think, a debate initiated actually by the government, but it's resonated quite well in the electorate. Also, I think when we talk about refugees and migrants, then we should also consider that I think for a lot of people, as already someone mentioned in the first panel, it won't be a problem to give asylum for people who are political refugees. But when it comes to migration, that's a different issue. So I think maybe it could be also important to consider actually these aspects. Marta, if you want to.
Yeah, very much so. And this is, did you mention this too? The differentiation between different groups of migrants. This has been a huge discussion for this paper that we've written. And we have on purpose decided to use the term newcomers as an overall term. And it may be good to talk a little bit about that. There was a reason for that. We decided to use the term newcomers as an overall term for everybody who is migrating. That means whether you are migrating for work, for seeking asylum, for reuniting with your family. Newcomers, we decided for that word as to focus more on the fact that somebody is coming new, as a person that is new in a country. And to focus even more on what that means for the country, especially once a decision is made that this newcomer can stay for a certain number of years, a certain amount of time, or perhaps perpetually in that country. So that we use that term also because we wanted to have a broader term to really talk about what that means. Now, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't differentiate. Of course we need to differentiate. I think it's crucial. Among these newcomers, there are huge differences. Among asylum seekers, there are huge differences. Among migrants, they have different needs. There are different criteria for societies to decide whether or not they can stay. But I think what we should focus on is that as a society, the essence again is to treat all these different newcomers equally and humanely. Then when we look, and that's also why we are then, when we go further into the details of our policy proposals, we look very specifically at both migrants or newcomers coming here for work and newcomers coming here for asylum. Because even though we want to differentiate, this is a gray area. I think there are a lot of people that are now coming to Europe. I mentioned this in my talk as well. They're coming to Europe that are looking for work, but there is no official way to do it. So they apply for asylum. And then they arrive here as asylum seekers. And then we have to make a decision about, are you allowed to have asylum? Well, no, because you are not officially persecuted in your own country. So no, you are not officially allowed to have asylum. But then what are we going to do? And that is why we say we have to also have alternatives for people to migrate in different ways. Because I think we need to, especially because we need to differentiate, we need to clear up the road towards asylum. That should really be for people who are actually fleeing from war, fleeing from persecution. But it also means that we need to have those alternatives for people to come for other reasons to Europe. Again, not saying that then we should just allow everybody in. I think that's where those criteria come in. Yeah.
Well, listening to your thoughts, the question comes, where and who should decide who can stay? Should we decide right at the Schengen border of the EU, for example, at the southern border of Hungary with Serbia, or maybe outside the EU? Because, of course, many of those who arrived since 2015 are not eligible to stay in the continent according to the applicable laws and regulations. They are not true refugees according to the Geneva Convention. From 6 to 7 people out of 10 must leave the country they are residing in, actually. So I think this is another problem. And well, and how could we equally treat these people? There will be many economic migrants among them. There will be some who truly deserve some kind of protection status in the receiving country. So I don't see the point in it. And you mentioned that there are no channels and chances for these people who seek a better life, for example, in the form of working in the EU. Each member state has its own visa rules. They can apply for visa, work visa, various permits. This is in a national competence according to the Treaty on the Functioning of the EU. So I don't see the point. If you wish to give it an EU framework for the countries on a voluntary basis, maybe that could be a starting point for policy making in Brussels. But otherwise, it's national competence. So and let me emphasize again, there are different groups, kinds of people, and in 2015, 400,000 crossed Hungary. These people came and moved to Western Europe. Why should Central Europe like this fact or be enthusiastic about it? So I think this is not the right process. If the EU or some Western European countries seek immigration, for example, to manage or address their demographic challenges or labor force shortages. So I still say that the categories are too mixed here to build some kind of policies on their own.
I can respond, but I also want to make sure that.
Yeah. Okay. I think, yeah, I would probably propose even more clarification of our definitions and terms we use. I see two particularly problematic fields here. One issue is telling apart, to a certain extent, refugees or people in need of humanitarian protection or people who are qualifying for Article 14 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which is the human right to seek and enjoy asylum in case of persecution, and other people who actually move to another country with the purpose of living there, with the purpose of doing economic activities, so who are considered international migrants by many definitions, and who are only partially covered by the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So, I mean, migration is a fundamental human right as long as it is about leaving your country, but it has never been a human right in the context of arriving in a country unless you get that type of invitation for that. And that's the crucial thing here, that this type of invitation is absolutely at the discretion of the political community. Can it be a nation state? It can be a federal state. So there are many. It can even be a municipality, as you said. But I mean, there is huge discretion in there. Whereas when it comes to asylum, there are binding universal considerations which can exclude or can even counter the arguments when it comes to including people in the first place. So talking about economic utility, talking about demography, talking about social cohesion, or even about social diversity is an absolutely legitimate discussion when it comes to kind of general and regular immigration. But we can be we should be very cautious with these arguments when it comes to asylum, because an asylum seeker should be granted protection even if the person is old, even if the person is disabled, even if the person would never ever contribute to the economy, would only make a so-called burden on it. So it's an absolutely different discourse. And I think it's very important to keep these two categories separate when we argue along policy lines, because this is sometimes made absolutely just at random, or sometimes created consciously by various political agendas to mix the two things together. So it's very important to have, even among ourselves, to have a clear understanding who we are talking about that. And the other distinction we have to make, and this is again an issue with this paper here, is to tell apart the issue of immigration in a strictly administrative and legal terms, so the right to enter and the right to reside in a country, and the question of social inclusion and the question of social integration. Because, I mean, you did a very quick-hand introduction here when you were talking 2 minutes ago, saying that this policy is presumably mainly about people, these newcomers, once the decision is made that they are supposed to stay. And this is what nobody denies, not even in Hungary. I remember you did a survey in 2016 among Hungarians about the support of the border fence, about the support of the harsh governmental refugee policies. And surprisingly, and this was Századvég, and this was, I mean, to my understanding and to my knowledge, and we had a big debate with Balázs, your director, that time, that it was even methodologically problematic. But I mean, people were very bluntly asked whether they would oppose people arriving in a country if they were persecuted. And I mean, 2/3 of Hungarians said they wouldn't have any problems with that. The very same people who were actually supporting the border fence, who were very much supporting of the governments not letting in people. So the question again was not about giving or not giving asylum, but about the people themselves who are coming, whether they were considered asylum seekers or not. And I think as long as there is no social consensus, and not talking about political consensus about or categorization, whatever we say can always be misunderstood by the other party. And of course, I mean, we can explain lengthily what we think, but there won't be a kind of a meaningful and fruitful debate about it. And I think that's very important. And of course, this is the responsibility of those who are not satisfied with the present situation. I mean, whoever, politically speaking, socially speaking, is having fun with the state of our societies or with the state of our political life, probably they won't make any efforts to get a better understanding. So we like it or not, simply saying that the others don't understand our terms or visions probably won't lead us very far away. So we need to make these efforts to identify the categories we are talking about.
Timo?
Yeah. Just a quick thought on this. Of course, I agree with this clear distinction and also making sure that we all understand them. But what we see in our research, at least in our data, we also looked at social media sites in a recent project, is that the majority population, they are not distinguishing between these factors. I mean, they're completely mixing everything up and over a long time. So we see all this information flowing in. You can have fact sheets, but it's actually, when you have the normal population, it's always mixed up. So being this optimistic that it can be really cured to have this, I'm not so optimistic about this. Of course, it has to be mentioned, but when we really look in the every time discussion about this, I'm not so optimistic. I mean, when calling someone newcomers, I think I also like to reframe the narrative a little bit. Of course, that would apply to people who are already accepted in a country which are already staying. I think creating a new group for people which are not even coming yet or still have to go through the application process, it's I think a little bit different. In the end is, I think, what is the majority population also mentally to accept new people? And I think this is the big difference of the region here from East and West. And of course, we have so much experience in the West and with other cultures, with the Turks coming up, even with the French in the 16th, 17th century. And here, I think in Hungary, it's a particular case, because in the other transformation countries it was a little bit different. They don't have a lot of experience with it. So for them, this it's a huge step to accept someone from let's say, I don't know, from West Africa, a migrant who is not having any, has no refugee reason, but coming for economic reason, whatever, even though I don't like this word. So I think it's the matter of small steps. But what they are able to accept is, I mean, they call this national Hungarians from the region. They might even call it Venezuelans, which have a Hungarian grandfather. I don't care how you call it, but I think it's just a matter of the small steps. Maybe it's just too big to already accept someone from a complete different region. And I think it just needs more time to have also for Hungary in this regard.
Just one short comment. Of course, I'm moderated, but I'd like to add some comment. There is a Central European tradition of integration. So when you mentioned the 16th, 17th century, a lot of people actually, because they were persecuted because of the religion, came to Transylvania or to Central Europe. I just want to add that there is such kind of tradition. But I think, Marta, you wanted to reply, or András?
I wanted just a very short remark on people's ability of making distinctions and think. I would use your findings for arguing along the opposite, adding a little bit of statistical data on actual immigration into the country, because I mean, throughout these years when actually the discourse on immigration became extremely harsh, like, within the past, I would say 5 or maximum 6 years, the number, I'm talking about sheer numbers, the number of people from the Middle East and Sub-Saharan Africa went up 4 times higher than they used to be. People from Far East, like East Asia, went up 3 times, so they are threefold than they used to be. So there's a huge and enormous immigration into the country compared to the situation 10 years ago, due to very, very expanded scholarship programs, university students coming from all around the world, and also because of the labor market and because of private enterprises, the ethnic economy I'm talking about, bringing in and absorbing people. And I mean, and this is the puzzling social situation, that you see those very negative reactions in abstract public opinion polls, whereas and you also see how resistant Hungarians are when it comes to receiving asylum seekers, when it comes to supporting the European quota. But when it comes to actually everyday interaction with people living in this country, and I'm talking about visibly different people, then I think it's smooth operation, business as usual. So not much changed.
Just a minute. So we just let it tell the audience that we are going to open the floor after some rounds. So just to make the round table a full circle, please.
And just adding to what has been said here, numbers matter. So if we have 1,000 people to integrate, to admit in a country, no problem. Not even in Central Europe. But if we see hundreds of thousands of people crossing countries, international borders, that's a very different situation. Numbers matter. 1.2 million applications were submitted in the EU in 2015. That's a huge number, even for the 8 million Germany. So I think this process has its very natural consequences. So I think numbers matter, and we talked to a few about this aspect. It doesn't matter. It truly matters whether we have to integrate 100, 1,000 people versus 1 million.
If I can just very quick question. Oh, yeah, sure.
Just give it to me.
Oh,
And I
okay.
can give it to my colleague, and then we can after your reflection, we can start with the questions from the audience. Please, Marta.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. Numbers matter, and the social inclusion, it matters. I fully agree. And it was also in the previous panel that it also became clear integration is hard work. It really is. And what I think is important is that we mention here is that for integration to work, it needs to be clear what politicians are doing. And it needs to be clear, I think, especially in Europe, what we are doing to regulate this in order to not indeed have, like, I'm also not in favor of using words as mass migration or crisis or explosions of migrants. But I would see every now and then we will in Europe see peaks of migration. That is going to happen. I wouldn't be surprised if in a few years from now there will be a next war in Lebanon, and then we will also expect to have new waves of refugees and migrants, a combination coming towards Europe. Now that would be another peak, and then we need to be prepared in order to not indeed overwhelm local communities with immigration. And so for that, I think it is very important that Europe starts to install good systems. On the one hand, short term at the border, like this goes back to your question of, well, who decides when and where. I think there should be a mechanism where that is EU coordinated, where we decide at EU external borders who is allowed to come in, indeed, just for asylum. I think that should be at the border, maybe perhaps also at other transition centers elsewhere in Europe. But there should be a mechanism where experts decide with due legal process, very important, whether people are allowed to come here for asylum or whether they should return. But that is not going to work if we do not do that together as European countries, especially because in order for people to return, you need to make agreements with the home countries, safe home countries, right? These are, again, not war zones, safe home countries for people who who do not get asylum. They should be able to return, and for that to work, the best is that Europe stands strong with multilateral agreements with countries that are safe, and that work even better if you have incentives for for countries to cooperate. If you can say, okay, these asylum seekers are not going to get asylum, they should return to this home country. If you cooperate and let them back in, then maybe we can give you so many work visa or student visa for people to come in legal ways to Europe. Like, these are ways that we want to think about it. But for that, we need to have constructive European cooperation. And I think that is, and then we need everybody on board, East and West.
Thank you very much. So I think we can continue with some inputs from the audience.
Thank you. I actually like to be a bit more impolite. And that's maybe not good because I'm invited here. But you said numbers matter. I agree. Language also matters. But I think democracy and democratic values and spirit do matter. And I think as I feel responsible as a senator for my constituents and the people voting for me, I also feel responsible for those who do not vote for me, for the minorities. And I think in leading the debate, the researchers have a mission. In leading also and criticizing or helping or assisting the democratic values to develop. Because it's easy to exploit fear. I said this in the morning and I repeat it. And it's easy to discuss very precise and very polite about what the people feel, and you contradict that some of the people actually do support. But it's important what the politicians tell them and what they do by leading by example. We had the Balkan countries who lived together, next neighbors, Croats, Bosnians, and after the war broke out, they were enemies. It's very easy to make enemies. It's much more complicated to unite and to pacificate and to work together. And that's just my, it's not a question. I could phrase it into a question. What do you think about this? I'm not going to do it because I want to make this statement. Thank you.
I was very happy to hear this remark because my question or my comment is related to this as well. That, for example, during the Kosovo war, like numbers matter. Orban, during his first prime ministership, said that 70,000 refugees are here from Yugoslavia, and it's not a problem. We can handle the situation. So it's a political will whether we take 1,300 migrants or refugees, whether we want to take them or we make a political issue out of this. And what I hear that there is a pragmatic discussion here with experts, but we don't talk in the same space. Like there is political, there is the political field. What takes this issue as a politicizable topic and for own political purposes, and how can you make politicians respect that this issue should not be politicized, or to make member states leaders not to block European action together, because I agree that we need constructive action. That's the only way to solve this problem. So how can you influence political leaders with that?
I think we can comment or answer the question, or maybe
I think both as an NGO or as an academic researcher, we have opportunities to influence political leaders, but also we have our own constraints and limits in that. And I think it's very important to have this division of labor. So I was very grateful listening to you making your statement, because this is exactly what should follow such a discussion. So I mean, politicians have the responsibility to govern and to govern a society. And And I mean, my big fear recently is exactly this, what you said, that from a consensual governance, there is a shift towards a majoritarian governance recently. And when it comes to issues which are more cross-cutting than simply party preferences or ideological dispositions, but which are actually at the stake of the integrity of local communities, I think this majority governance has its flaws and has its backlashes, and we clearly feel this and see it. So of course, I mean, what we can do is to engage in debate and dialogue and feed in information, and also like either it all depends on the situation. Sometimes we need to simplify things, and sometimes we need to kind of focus on particular issues. For instance, when it comes to the present asylum policy, again, we are not questioning principles. It's probably far too high. But when it comes to the actual access to the country of those who are in need of protection, or when it comes to the actual integration need and support of those who are already in the country, whom you were talking about, an NGO such as ours does everything to convince politicians to do things differently, because that's the common interest, not only the interest of those people who are concerned, but also the interest of those who are in interaction with them, be them policemen, be them only their neighbors or teachers at the schools they go to. But I would also be very cautious, both as an NGO person and also as a researcher, to take this blame on myself, saying that why can't I tell politicians how they should act and react. The only thing I do is that I go to every election and cast my vote to the person or to the party I feel serving my or my country's interest the best, and that's all. The rest is theirs because they got the salary for it, probably a pretty fat one, as I'm getting a salary for doing my my service work at the NGO, and I think it should be a fair deal, and we should cooperate as much as we can.
Yeah, just an example. I mean, from the center-left parties. I mean, in Europe, a couple of them really tried this technique. You know, put this topic off the agenda. Don't talk about this anymore. Long migration is a losing issue for the left. Leave it out. Don't discuss it. Rephrase it with other topics. Say mainstream it to the debate and other topics, but. There are many European examples. For example, the Danish Social Democrats, they completely tried the other way to just follow the right wing, just also harder border security follow up. I mean, in the end, I could not find a single really important example where that really worked for the central left. So I think it's a completely difficult issue, and I think the only thing that really works is, I think it's this reframing it in a bigger picture. You know, what's really the origin of this thing, and then this transition states is, of course, it's also a little bit. Now, I mean, there's a quite low unemployment rate in these countries here. You know, what happened if this boom will stop one time? You know, what will happen here in this region? So maybe this is also of course, it's globalization critics a little bit, but what will happen after this phase? And isn't there such a way more bigger important aspect than this conflict about migration? But yeah, I have no success. Yeah, climate change. But these are the big words. I don't want to get too abstract in this regard. But so far, the central left has really not found a solution. It's a tragic, tragic point. Yeah.
Just a brief reflection to the Kosovo, which was mentioned. Well, in the South Slav War, Hungary accepted 10,000 of refugees who were refugees in both the terms of international law and effectively. So I think that was a very, very clear case, and not only Hungarians, people of Hungarian origins from the neighboring countries living beyond our borders were accepted, but also other people from other nations. So this is true for right-wing government, Antal's government, for the Horn government, and for the first Orbán government. So I think the solidarity and the international obligations are accepted and welcomed by Hungarians in general. What has been the case since 2015? I think it's a much more complicated one.
Well, very briefly, I think your question is a tricky one, because it's basically how to take the politics out of politics. Yeah, I know that's not the entire question, but I think we also should realize this is politics, and it's also nothing new. We've always had tough populist politics, whatever you want to call it, or political heated debates. I think it's most important to be specific. I think one thing that I see at least happening in the Netherlands is now that we have quite a right-wing party that has gotten very strong in the recent elections, and there's a tendency to be very throw out broad, angry statements about them being fascist. Well, I don't think that helps. I also don't think that that's entirely true. I mean, there are definitely things I really, really don't like about this party, but I think it's important to be specific. What is it that we don't like as liberals, for example, and then also ask real questions. So what is it that they really want? So to try to kind of break through the shouting.
Thank you. If there are any more questions, yeah, I see a question there and back there.
Could you kindly tell us the concrete examples of the integration programs in the local communities? Thank you.
Hello. My question is more about vision, not policy making. Let's suppose that we can create these legal channels, and my question is about that. If we create these channels, the experts will probably pick out the best and the brightest, as it's economically rational. And in my view, the pressure of migration will still remain. But your solution for that is invest money in this region. And there is a vast number of studies that criticize that how much damage caused in Africa these Western financial aids. Are you sure that this is the right way, or not political stability, or something like this? I don't know. Thank you.
Okay,
so first of all, it's the question about local integration program that was addressed to all of us, or yeah, okay. What is actually done? Okay, so very, very briefly about that. In the Netherlands, what we've seen is that for a long time there's been a de-investment in integration policy and integration programs. That means that the national government, we had integration programs nationally, locally, but money was taken away from them. And for a long time, we had no real integration policy, at least for the last couple of years, or very limited. The only thing that we had was that newcomers had to do an integration test. Well, I won't get into the details of all that, but that is quite clearly a failure. Like, if you don't have integration policy, well, what we see now, people only have to just make that test, and a lot of people are failing this test. Now, this is changing at the moment, and very interestingly is that the national government is now changing its policy and is trying to invest more in individual integration programs. And meantime, municipalities are already going ahead, especially the big cities. They said, we are not waiting for the national government to come along. We have started our own integration programs simply because we have to. If we have quite a few newcomers, we need them to speak Dutch, we need them to join the labor force. So, and what I think is very valuable, the success stories I know, is where they combine, where they basically say, we are going to combine language courses with on-the-job training and internship, traineeships, and possibilities for studying to get further ahead in society. So but maybe afterwards we can talk more about that, because that's a long story. To answer your question, yes, thank you. That is a very important, very critical point that we also address in the publication, because it's true. If you invest in development in countries in Africa, what happens and what we see happening now is that if you invest only a little bit and the development rates go up a little bit, then you actually see migration also going up. And that is very challenging also for us as liberals, because we very much believe in long-term policy, investing in the region so that people can build up their own future there. But if you only do that a little bit, then there's actually a risk that people just get enough money that allows them to migrate. So the challenge for us is to step it up and to be smart about it. I think development is not about digging wells so that people can get water. It's about making sure that there are industries that provide employment, making sure that people learn about sustainable farming techniques so that they can better cultivate the land with diverse produce. It's about making sure that students have proper education so that they get opportunities and that they can further develop their own country. So I think we need to be very strategic about how we invest, and indeed not just say, here's some money, dig some wells, development, and then people will still come and seek their fortunes here.
Well, as for the integration programs, local integration programs, I'm not an integration expert, but I just read it in the news a couple of weeks ago that nearly half of those taking German language courses failed. Actually, meaning 10,000 of people. So this is just a small data for the size of the challenge, so we can get a picture how big challenge this is. For example, to Germany. And as for the other question raised by the gentleman, well, we can see in the world working systems like that. For example, the Australian one with its point system, which clearly tries to get the best, let's say, brains from all over the world according to its own labor market necessities or demand. So I think we can see in Australia a system under laboratory circumstances, and I think this is good for Australia actually, because they can take the best people from all over the world. But it raises another question whether this is the responsible behavior if we take into account the interests of these standing regions. Do we good for Africa if we take their best people away from them, or they could be useful later, decades later, for these countries? So I think this is a very, very difficult question, and not to mention the challenge. The colleague here said that if income goes up a little bit, then migration will follow. So I think these are very complex questions to which we won't find answers here at the table, unfortunately.
Yeah, with the integration, I think Andras would probably be the best expert on this, because he's doing these programs on the ground. I mean, in Germany, of course, it's been a huge number, and you mentioned the number of failures. I can also mention numbers of quite success, and I mean. Also, yesterday, the number came out that 40,000 refugees who came to 2015-16, they were also found work in the craftsmanship already. I think this is also quite, of course, it's not an integration program, it's work in the communities, but I think of course, you would, I think, share with me the thought that if you found a job, it's one of the biggest steps to a successful integration. And I think just takes time. I think there are big programs, the army funds from the EU, but local communities, and of course, 2015-16, the biggest support was by the local communities from the bottom up organized. The local communes were really slow in this regard, but of course it's heating up now. Half of the spaces are empty again. There were some communes are even having more capacities for it. So it's but they're really slow at following us. Yeah, just a remark. I mean, it's even more than just a small gap in the relationship. I think it's up to $6,000 or $7,000 income at this rate raised, the migration is increasing in these countries. So it's a very big gap. It's just not just the poorest are leaving. But I was just want to add one argument. I think migration itself can also then create more development. You see, it's also in the Schengen zone. Yeah, of course, if you have free movement, this also creates new jobs. So it's not only a problem if we see migration as a problem. I think it's a number of definition, but it also creates then again also wealth itself in these countries. So it's self-supported.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I would continue with this and then get back to the integration issues, and I think probably we can grasp the vision better. I mean, you were asking more about the vision than certain services. If we sort of broaden the frame, and you make an attempt to it, and also you mentioned it during your speech when you were talking about the different types of freedoms, like negative and positive freedoms, and probably that's one of the solutions to have a framework in which we can talk about people's level of freedom in both sense, and not so much about whether migration is good or bad, or whether migration is needed or not needed, but whether migration is out of exercising a greater freedom, or whether migration is happening because of the lack of freedom, both in a negative or in a positive sense. And actually, the theorist who put it down in a pretty influential paper in migration research is a Dutch one, Hein de Haas, who wrote about it about 5 years ago, and also asking for a new paradigm here. So no longer talking about this endless debate whether what is good, what is bad. Let's talk about people. Let's talk about communities and talk about the benefits and the losses. What happen in those communities. And sometimes or very often migration is not a means or not a goal in itself, but only a tool to achieve a better life or better circumstances. And then I would call in another theoretical author, Paul Collier, who is Canadian, who wrote about the various actors of migration. And I mean, his model is a very, very applicable one. So we like it even in doing groundwork, because it's a very simple formula, asking about the benefits and who benefits. And he's advocating for a so-called Pareto optimal situation in international migration, when the different actors, be them the receiving communities, the sending communities, the migrants, or if it's a complex migration, even the transit communities you can include. And then you can always ask the question, who benefits? Or you can ask the question, do these people benefit from it? And then if your answer is yes in all circumstances and in all cases, then you can make them sure that this migration is good. If your answer is no in all circumstances or in most circumstances, then you can make sure that the migration is bad. And then, of course, there are the issues where it's not that clear, and this gives us job both as researcher or politicians or NGO activists to sort out and to have a clear and more or less consensual view on what is happening. So actually the vision is more about eventually asking about the complexity of the system, rather than asking only about the interest of particular fragmented communities, leaving all the others out of the calculus. I mean, this is what you are calling for when you are talking about human dignity. So it's not about citizenship, it's not about membership. I mean, there should be a baseline fundamental level, and if it's beneficial on that fundamental level, then let's go for it. And if not, then try trimming and stemming it. And of course, it can be painful. So sometimes development helps, sometimes building fences help, or confining migrant boats on the Libyan shores can be helpful, or extending the deal with Turkey can be helpful. And I mean, these are all issues which I'm sure, I mean, based on your fundamental liberal values, which I guess shared by most of the audience here, could be pretty stinky and problematic. Nevertheless, I mean, you said it in your panel that you need to make concessions and pragmatic decisions sometimes. So that's the story here. So I mean, there is a level beyond which there is no point talking about migration any longer. It's much better to talk about quality of life and talk about a meaningful and free and dignified human life, both on individual and community level. And if you go for that, then probably much of the problem would be sorted out. And yeah, for the integration programs, I mean, very generally speaking, I think they are more or less identical all across Europe, because there's usually needs-based issues. So social integration takes place spontaneously in local communities in an ideal situation. So you don't need any state intervention in that, or even you can say the more you intervene, the more likely that you will screw it up at a certain point. But there are situations when things don't go that smoothly, and these are the things you need to identify. Sometimes it is because of the numbers, too many people at a too short period of time. It can be structural, for instance, if the labor market is not open enough, or if, for instance, in Hungary right now, the biggest integration problem for those who can't afford, like, buying anything in the market is housing. And it's a very complex issue because housing market is problematic for Hungarian citizens, but obviously if you are an immigrant and if you are a refugee with no means, then it is much more difficult because prices went up, and it's very difficult to find an affordable housing. 10 years ago it was employment. Housing was relatively fine, and employment was impossible. Again, ironically, since the crisis of 15, finding an employment for a refugee who don't even speak Hungarian, who has spent a couple of weeks only in a country with no educational background, nothing, you can do it in 2 days. It's not your dream job, but you can find a work and you can secure your salary. But it hasn't been always like this, and maybe it will change in a couple of years. So whenever you design an integration program, you should make sure that you intervene in the areas where there are needs and there are difficulties. And it can be a language course, it can be an intercultural orientation. Recently, we work an awful lot with local communities because there is a general discourse and a general campaign out there that migration is bad and migrants are dangerous. And of course, you need to explain it to people that life is slightly more complicated than that. But then you need to invest into that. So sometimes you work with the majority society in order to promote and facilitate integration. There's one more thing that, I mean, at the moment, none of this is funded by the state, which is a pity, actually. But there was again a political decision, so whatever is going on in the field is done by private donors, international donors from the UNHCR, from the European Commission, but directly from Brussels and not through the Ministry of the Interior, unfortunately, and also done by NGOs or church-based organizations.
Integration is a two-way process, posing obligations on both the receiving society, country in general, and the migrants themselves who arrive. They must be open, they must accept the helping hand offered to them. So I think it can be successful only if these two factors are there. For example, if they see that they are not motivated to learn the local language, to take part in the labor market, etc., they won't do that because they have their small communities and again numbers. They have the option not to learn the local language and do everyday interactions with the locals. They can live with their own citizens in some blocks. For example, we see some signs of this already in the western part of Europe. So I think this is not a lucky situation. It is not a win-win for anyone if this happens, and that's why it's so important that this is a two-way process with many players involved.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, we ran out of time. It was, I think, a very interesting discussion. We had theoretical challenges, political challenges. Also, we heard about practical issues and on-field experiences. Very interesting experience. Thank you, András, for these inputs. Well, the conference title was The Common Grounds. Maybe I'm skeptic that I think we couldn't depoliticize migration issue, but my impression was that maybe it's possible to find at least a common ground when it comes to definitions, maybe after the upcoming May elections, European Parliament elections, migration will be a very important topic. But I'm optimistic in the sense that there's going to be some common ground when it comes to definitions. At least we know who should be let in, excluded, and so on. So I think it's very important. Thank you, Marta, for your presentation all in the morning. Thank you for our panelists, and thank you for all attending the conference. And I'd like to please do not forget to fill out this questionnaire, which you can find on this table. Thank you very much again.